Pokemon, medicine and martial arts. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author, we are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 651, Flame Bird Appears. Okay, it's not as serious as you're making it out to be. That was just a little gadget I invented. It's a small sound bomb based on the roaring bomb. Just one of these, dropped, can be heard within a 5-kilometer radius. Seeing Yu's brow furrow, as if about to reprimand him, Amen quickly interrupted. Calm down, I know what you're going to say. My sound bomb won't do any harm to Pokemon. Is it effective? How do you use that Chinese idiom to describe a lot of noise but little action? It'll just make some noise, silly. But I think this sound bomb should be enough to wake Moltres from her slumber. Let's wait and see. Amen looked confident, his gaze blazing as he gazed at the molten lava surging in the crater due to the massive sound waves. Beyond anticipation, his eyes were filled with excitement. Not only him, but even Yu, Serena, and the other Pokemon, all stared intently, unblinking, at the molten lava swirling in the crater. Pikachu Firefly Longtail 66, and the next moment, all 4 Pokemon cried out in unison, continuously shouting towards the lava, as if something was within. This was perfectly natural. After all, Pokemon's perceptions were far superior to humans. Their innate ability to sense danger was unprecedented. Of course, it wasn't that Pikachu and the others sensed danger. Rather, it was the sudden surge of a powerful aura that sent them wailing involuntarily, their voices tinged with excitement. Boom, 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 boom. Like a volcanic eruption, a thick column of molten flame erupted from the crater. Because of its suddenness and the immense power it contained, the rock column, as it soared into the sky, sent tiny splatters of lava spurting outward. The spectacular scene resembled twinkling stars in a dark night sky. Even though it was still daytime and the sun was high above, the molten lava couldn't stop its dazzling brilliance. Then, as if reaching a climax, the molten lava began to spread outward like a volley of arrows, blanketing the surrounding area. Even before it touched the surface, the heat from the falling lava alone made everyone standing there feel warm. Oh my god, what a grand gesture, wow, so beautiful. Is this the legendary scattering of flowers from the sky, really? It's so beautiful, but it feels a little too hot, help. Because of the suddenness and speed of this scene, everyone present, except Yu, was stunned for a moment. A legendary beast is indeed a legendary beast. The special effects of this appearance alone are worth more than a dime. Yu couldn't help but secretly admire him, but he didn't dare to show any disrespect. Pikachu, wake up. Now is not the time to be surprised by what you're seeing. Quickly use 100,000 volts to disperse the falling lava. As he gave the order, he seemed to feel that this wasn't enough to completely withstand the molten lava's scattering attacks. Yu hurriedly pulled out another Pokemon from his waist and tossed it out. He released Gyarados, powerful enough to be ranked among his main force. Gyarados, use water cannon. Gyarados without the slightest hesitation. The moment a Gyarados was released from the Pokeball, it instantly condensed a massive water cannon, sweeping towards the lava blanketing overhead with overwhelming force. The massive jet of water, facing the scattered lava dots above, was like a water truck. Adding to the mix was Pikachu's 100,000 volt attack. While it wasn't as effective as water cannon, when combined with the water attributed ability, the power it unleashed was still considerable. In an instant, the lava sparks, once perceptibly warm, vanished as if they had never been there. If it weren't for the lingering warmth in the air indicating the presence of these tiny specks of lava, Serena and the other 2 would have suspected they were hallucinating. What's going on? Serena was still a little confused. What could have happened? Of course it's Moltres. Amen rubbed his hands, his face radiating with excitement, as if he didn't care if the lava had just scalded them. All he could see was Moltres. Compared to the excitement and euphoria of the others, Yu's expression was much more solemn. Wow! This Moltres must be quite high-ranking. Just such an ordinary movement caused such a commotion. Yu's hand had already unconsciously reached for the deep water ball at his waist. If anything seemed amiss, he would immediately dispatch Suicune. He couldn't let anything happen to his beloved children. Flame as expected, the pillar of fire that soared into the sky dissipated. A resounding bird cry echoed through the heavens. As the pillar of fire gradually dissipated, the true form of the legendary Moltres was revealed. It was the so-called Moltres, with a straight, pointed beak and nearly brown skin. Its long, streamlined crest and swirling, flaming tail were both composed of flames. Its wings were also covered in flame-like feathers. Its cloven-toed feet were brown. With every flap of its wings, tiny sparks of fire flickered, creating a sense of nobility and splendor. Wow! Is this the legendary Moltres? So beautiful, indeed, its wings are so gorgeous. Ha Moltres, the legendary Moltres, I didn't expect it to really exist. Ha I finally saw the legendary Moltres, Molten? It's really amazing. I estimate its level has reached at least the semi-champion level. Chapter 652 The battle begins. Molten, the flame Pokémon. A legendary bird Pokémon that controls fire. It's said that when injured, it plunges into the lava of a volcano, burning its entire body to heal its wounds. Sparks flash as it flaps its wings, a beauty that thrills the hearts of all who see it. This legendary Pokémon, the electronic synthesizer of the Pokédex, began to play. It was undoubtedly the Pokédex's diligent and inquisitive new trainer, Serena. Amazing, truly amazing. This Moltres' power really makes my blood boil. Unlike the others around him, Yu, while clearly trying to suppress his excitement, radiated unabashed fighting spirit. Excellent, truly fantastic. Moltres, I challenge you to Pokémon battle. Please accept my Pokémon battle, Yu challenged her without hesitation. But Moltres ignored Yu, not even glancing at him. At this moment, their marriage was furious. He had been sleeping soundly, but the sudden, loud noise had disturbed his peaceful dreams. How could he possibly endure this? And now, there was this reckless brat in front of him, daring to challenge him? Didn't he know that fire-type Pokémon tend to be fiery? After a cursory glance at Yu and the other Pokémon, Moltres' final gaze shifted to Yu. He thought, who said that among all these people, Yu was the one that threatened them the most? While Moltres felt a slight threat, who was Moltres? It was a legendary beast. He showed no fear and unleashed a powerful fire jet, a move known only to fire-type Pokémon, sweeping towards Yu. It seemed he intended to deal with the biggest problem first, then move on to the remaining smaller ones. Good. I've been waiting for this. Yu didn't panic at all, as the fire jet was locked onto the legendary beast. Instead, he looked eager to try. You didn't notice at all that this wasn't Moltres' response to your challenge. It was clearly an act of impatience, intended to send you flying. Yu remained oblivious to all this, instead excitedly discussing the rules of battle with the legendary beast before him. Hey, but let me make this clear. Since you're a legendary beast, and a high-level one at that, I'm not going to resort to a one-on-one fight. I'm going to send all my Pokémon to battle you, alright? My rules are up to you, that's all. Now the show truly begins. Gyarados, use water cannon. Pikachu, use 100,000 volts. Yu busily issued orders to the two Pokémon he had released. Simultaneously, he began to pull Pokéballs from his belt, tossing them one after another like a baseball. Consequently, red lights flashed one after another. He dispatched the remaining Pokémon, including Suicune, Blaziken, Charmeleon, Buzzbit, Snorlax, Ditto, and Scrabble. He showed absolutely no intention of attempting a decisive battle, nor did he harbor the slightest desire to wear down the opponent. It's worth noting that after Yu released Suicune, he immediately sensed the presence of Moltres, a fellow legendary beast. Moltres' power was even slightly superior to Suicune's, and Suicune was completely enraged. Rays of divine power emanated from his body, and a battle ensued between him and Moltres. As their eyes locked, it felt as if wisps of lightning flashed between them. This was a battle between water and fire, and a contest between two legendary beasts. Yu believed that rather than defeating them one by one and being crushed by the sheer might of a single blaze, it would be better to attack in groups from the outset. At least Moltres would be overwhelmed by the constant barrage of group attacks. He acted on his thought, and after giving the orders to Pikachu and Gyarados, Yu's voice began to ring out. Charmeleon, use Flame Jet. Buzzbit, use Ultrasonic Wave. Rocket, use Air Slash. Ditto, use Transform to transform into Suicune, and then join Suicune in attacking with Water Cannon. Yu didn't hold back at Suicune, a fellow legendary Pokémon, and sent them all out at once. Especially after Ditto transformed into Suicune, these two Suicunes, plus a Gyarados, were like a mobile water turret. And with 3 Pokémon firing water cannons, they coordinated perfectly, their water cannons firing continuously. If this happened to any other Pokémon, or if these 3 Pokémon were recast with other attributes, Moltres wouldn't seem as intimidated by the fire attribute attacks of Blaziken and Charmeleon. It would be a case of one taking advantage of the other, but due to the attribute restrained, even a legendary Pokémon couldn't avoid this. After all, after being injured, it still takes time and energy to repair itself. Since it's been a rare opportunity to recover, it's time to make the most of it. And despite the previously mentioned battle between legendary Pokémon, Suicune at least showed some self-awareness and intelligence. Knowing full well and with absolutely no confidence of defeating the opponent, Suicune didn't hesitate or feel embarrassed, and simply joined the attack. After all, the opponent was so powerful. To confront another Pokémon head-on when you're no match for them is not bravery, it's foolishness. Although under the influence of their trainer, both Suicune and Pikachu were more or less affected by Yu's battle-crazed personality and became more or less very belligerent, but Chapter 653 level. Although both Suicune and Pikachu, influenced to some degree by their trainer's battle-crazed personality, had become more belligerent, their trainer's shrewdness had helped them learn something. This, in turn, infuriated Moltres, sending it soaring through the air, emitting crisp yet furious cries. Suicune, facing Moltres' irritated self-questioning, uttered a dismissive murmur, and then the inactive companions joined in, unleashing their abilities to siege Moltres. Of course, the main force in this battle was Suicune, Charmeleon, Pikachu, and Gyarados, the 3 most powerful Pokémon. Due to the limitations of these 4 Pokémon without the ability to send messages, like Buzzbot and Flarahawk, engaged in a primarily harassing battle. Seeing their method was effective, Ditto, on a whim, abandoned his Suicune form and transformed into Pidgeot, a flying-type Pokémon that looked quite formidable. As for why he didn't transform into Moltres-like Pokémon to engage in combat as usual, instead transforming into a seemingly ordinary Pidgeot? This, in fact, was Ditto's cleverness. Ditto's soul transformation skill might be flawed in some ways, but the creature it transformed into was at least identical to the original, otherwise, it wouldn't be a transformation skill. This meant that if Ditto used his transformation skill to transform into the enemy's form in a group battle, he would be highly likely to be accidentally injured by his own allies. Therefore, Ditto could only transform into Pidgeot, a flying-type Pokémon he considered quite formidable. As for Snorlax, well, forgive him. Although Snorlax hadn't yet evolved into a Snorlax-like, gluttonous existence. But at this moment, it seemed completely oblivious to the tense atmosphere. It stood there foolishly, scratching its furry, round belly, staring with innocent eyes as it watched the battle between its friends and Moltres. Its expression was like a fan watching their idol, just shy of shouting 666, okay, let's ignore this idiot for now. After all, while Snorlax's evolved form possessed impressive combat power, it was still just a Snorlax, and hadn't even made it out of its juvenile stage. Facing the combined attacks of several Pokémon, Moltres had no intention of sitting still and waiting for death. It quickly unleashed a new move. A vortex of flames enveloped its entire body, acting like a barrier. Various abilities, controlled by it, only briefly caused it to pause and create a slight crack, which quickly healed. Even so, 3 powerful moves were still unleashed, directly breaching the flaming vortex's defensive barrier. Needless to say, 2 of these were the water-type Suicune and Gyarados. As for the remaining one, it was, of course, our Pikachu. While there was a power gap between the Pokémon and the legendary Moltres, it wasn't significant. After such a long journey, the oldest members, such as Pikachu and Gyarados, had truly matured and were approaching the next level. Pikachu and Gyarados were only a final step away from reaching the ultimate level. Reaching the ultimate level meant you had at least the strength to compete in major tournaments. After all, regions were regions, and countries were nations. There was a chasm between them that could not be crossed. To bridge this gap, possessing a supreme Pokémon was the only ticket. After all, didn't you see that the previous Kalos League champion, Karuna, and several other top players were holding a support exchange meeting, but were ultimately stopped by Snow Leopard single-handedly? While there are many unknown factors involved, it's undeniable that Snow Leopard is stronger than Karuna, the Kalos League champion. There are certainly many who are stronger than Snow Leopard internationally, but they're not numerous. After all, if they were at their level, they'd hardly even put up a fight. And don't underestimate Karuna, thinking she didn't succeed in defeating Snow Leopard during the previous rescue. That was because Karuna wasn't completely cornered. If that had happened, Snow Leopard would have been severely injured, if not killed. While Pokemon's strength may be a little unclear now and in the future, let's convert it to trainer level. Karuna is undoubtedly a champion-level trainer. Champion-level trainers, after all, are no small feat. Even a country like Japan boasts only 50 or 60 champion trainers. While this number is small, it's actually quite high. Some countries even boast only as many champion trainers as Japan alone. It can be said that only trainers who reach champion rank truly stand on the world stage, reaching the pinnacle of power. Ultimately, a person's strength isn't determined by their Pokemon's level, but by their own trainer level. After all, powerful Pokemon can be obtained from others, but only one's own strength truly belongs to them. For example, if someone possesses a champion Pokemon but their trainer level is only elite, not only will the Pokemon's true potential be unleashed, but it might even hinder its performance. Worse still, those powerful Pokemon might even disobey or even defy their trainer's orders. While there are some rare exceptions, this is generally the case. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 654 Synchronous Evolution. On the other hand, if a less powerful Pokemon is commanded by a champion-level trainer, its power will no longer be its original strength. Instead, it will be boosted by 1 or 2 levels, potentially even increasing to 50% of its original power. Therefore, based on the above factors, when a Pokemon trainer reaches champion level, it is equivalent to a different world within the tribe, where only masters exist. However, for Yu, it's a bit premature to say so. After all, his current trainer level has barely reached the level of a Supreme, and he doesn't even own a Supreme-level Pokemon. Flame Moltres let out a cry even louder than before, clearly furious that Pikachu and the others had broken through its Flame Vortex defenses. It let out a long, heavenward cry, and the once clear sky became even clearer. The scorching sun hung high in the sky, its heat radiating outwards through the gentle breeze that blew in from the surroundings. At that moment, the rock walls surrounding the crater were almost visible, emitting a faint wisp of gas from the rising heat. This was especially true for Pikachu and other Pokemon, who weren't fire-type or able to fly. They could clearly feel the heat radiating from the floor. Why am I suddenly feeling so hot? I wonder if you've felt the same way. Yes, I just felt it, but I thought it was just from being in the crater. I didn't expect you to feel it, too. Serena and the other two were already sweating profusely, their clothes practically soaking through. They couldn't help but pull out fans from their backpacks and fan themselves diligently. It should be sunny, right? Change weather, one of the skills that can control the situation. In this kind of weather, it's more effective against fire and grass-type Pokemon. Yu, with his keen eye, immediately recognized the skill Moltres had used. However, he wasn't just saying it, in his heart, he was incredibly nervous. This might have been fine at first, but now, because of the sunny day, with the blessing of this angel, Moltres, which is itself a mythical beast, has become even more powerful. Although the effect of the sunny day skill has the same amplifying effect on Charmeleon, which also has the fire attribute, Yu would rather not have such a small amplification. After all, there is a gap in strength between the two sides. The skills that Moltres uses to lock on are not on the same level as Charmeleon's. However, it was too late for Yu to think about it. Moltres' jet of flames was immediately condensed and sprayed towards the Pokemon. Forget it, now we can only fight against the enemy with our generals and block the water with earth. Pikachu, use 100,000 volts. Gyarados and Suicune, use water cannon. Kralker, use destruction beam. Flarahawk and Buzzbit, use air slash. Ditto, use transform. Transform into the water Pokemon you consider the strongest, and then use water cannon as well. Yu immediately unleashed all the Pokemon's abilities, a desperate attempt at a desperate remedy. After all, Moltres' jet of fire was already powerful at the beginning, but now, with the added power of a field skill like Sunny Day, its power must have skyrocketed. And just as Yu had imagined, this single jet of fire, like the simple one from earlier, had significantly increased its particle size. Even from a distance, before it even reached the target, Yu and the other Pokémon could feel the heat wave bearing down on them. Facing the surging flames that swirled like a flaming dragon, Yu unleashed his 100,000 forward skills, one after another, as if they were free. This way, he attempted to extinguish the raging flames into thin air. Still not working? It's really too obvious, he couldn't help but frown. Seeing that his side's mixed attack was about to be broken by the surging flames, Yu fell silent. But, if that's the case, then this is a good time to test our limits. After a brief frown, Yu pondered for a moment, and then his frown relaxed. He raised his arms forward, and in that moment, he felt his previously restless heart become calmer than ever before. His mind and heart were completely empty. He seemed to have forgotten that the Pokémon battle was still going on, and that his side was in a precarious situation. The surroundings seemed to have vanished at that moment, leaving only Yu and Suicune in the vast space. Perhaps it was due to the situation, or perhaps it was an illusion, but Yu actually subtly sensed Suicune's mood at the moment. It was similar to his own, initially anxious, but gradually calming down. Brilliant rays of light began to converge at the end point between Yu and Suicune. Like two ropes tied together, they finally connected directly. There was no gap, and no knots at either end. And at this moment, in such a special state, Yu felt as if he had become one with Suicune. He was Suicune, and Suicune was him. The two were indistinguishable from each other. Yu could even clearly sense Suicune's thoughts at the moment, as well as his body, which was tense from excessive tension. Is this Suicune's inner world and thoughts? It's quite rich, it seems. He doesn't usually have much to do. What a waste of imagination. Maybe I could consider using this state to understand the Pokémon's thoughts and write a novel. Yu had no idea that if anyone outside knew his thoughts, they would probably want to tear him into pieces. After all, is achieving this state of sync between trainer and Pokémon as simple as eating and drinking? Chapter 655 Hot Wind. You have to understand that the ability for Pokémon and their trainers to Mega Evolve again and gain new powers is entirely dependent on the special connection forged between the Mega Evolution Key and the Mega Evolution Stone. Furthermore, in addition to possessing the Mega Evolution Stone and the Mega Evolution Key, a strong bond between the trainer and Pokémon is also required for this series of evolutions to proceed. It's nothing like the convenient and quick synchronized evolution between Yu and Suicune. While this special connection between Yu and Suicune is undoubtedly unprecedented, Yu has no idea whether it will be repeated in the future. In this state, Yu felt an unprecedented surge of power. He even gained a subtle sense of certain elements in the air, as if they were part of his body. Yu knew this was Suicune's current mastery of water attributed power, as a water-based divine beast. The air contained a few water molecules, which is why Yu could sense them through Suicune's shared perception. Amazing. This is what power feels like. I feel like my whole body is overflowing with energy. Come on, I'll take on 10 of you alone. Pointing his finger at Moltres, now engulfed in flames, Yu's eyes were filled with a look of contempt, his tone tinged with a rare hint of Chunabun against the world. Flame, as if understanding what Yu meant, yet also feeling its dignity as a divine beast challenged, Moltres cried out to the heavens. The fire energy surrounding the volcano became visible to the naked eye, drawing elemental power from all around, centered around Moltres. Come on. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Suicune, use freeze beam. Yu felt an endless supply of energy. Consequently, he felt completely fearless. However, seemingly because Yu and Suicune had fallen into such a synchronized state, Yu momentarily forgot to issue orders to the other Pokémon and addressed only Suicune. However, in this shared state with Suicune, Yu didn't need to speak at all. He could communicate almost solely through his thoughts. But out of habit, Yu subconsciously issued his orders. As if knowing the ensuing battle would intensify, and that the entire crater would become the battleground for Suicune and Moltres, the two legendary beasts of water and fire, the weaker Pokémon, led by Ditto, began to retreat. As for the stronger Pokémon, such as Pikachu and Charmeleon, they didn't retreat. They simply kept a slight distance, so as not to interfere with the battle between the two legendary beasts. They could still come to the rescue in an emergency. Suddenly, a gust of hot wind, streaked with sparks, blew towards the people and Pokémon watching from the crater. Unlike the previous scorching breeze, this time, the hot wind blew towards them, causing a slight stinging sensation on the people and Pokémon. Why does the air suddenly feel so hot? And for some reason, there's a faint burning sensation. I wonder if this is Molter's fault. Serena and the others unconsciously sped up their movements, hoping to cool themselves down. However, in the face of absolute power, these small movements proved completely ineffective. If I'm not mistaken, this must be a fire-type Heat Blast skill. Yu pulled out his Pokédex and, after some manipulation, came to this conclusion. No wonder it's so hot. Pokémon abilities aren't just used in battle, but also in everyday life. For example, Blastoise and Squirtle's water cannon and water gun abilities can be used in firefighting. Pidgeot's fierce wind can also act as a breeze, just like Molter's Heat Blast skill right now. Besides the constant rush of wind against them, the unbearable heat spoke volumes. Heat Blast, after all, is a Pokémon skill, and while it might not be particularly powerful against humans, the Pokémon themselves, especially Suicune, who bore the brunt of the attack, felt the scorching energy all the more clearly. This was because Flaming Hawk, for some unknown reason, didn't immediately withdraw after Yu's command, instead lingering around Molter's. This gave Molter's an opportunity. Since it couldn't do anything about the Pokémon in front of it, it decided to deal with this annoying fly first. So, while Suicune and the other Pokémon were struggling to withstand the Heat Blast, their abilities distracted, Molter's unleashed another Heat Blast. This time, however, its target wasn't Suicune or the others, who had troubled him. Instead, it was Flaming Hawk, who was, by comparison, less powerful and seemingly completely powerless. Fire Arrow. Facing Molter's powerful attack, Flaming Hawk refused to sit still and wait for death. It actually began to counterattack, unleashing a flurry of air slashes. True to its name, it seemed to slice through the air. However, faced with the scorching winds that swept in like a storm, those air slashes were like a small boat on a raging sea. It began to tremble and tumble amidst the blazing waves. In the end, there was no trace of the air slashes at all, as if the Fiery Arrow Eagle had never used this skill in the first place. Fiery Arrow, seeing that its first move had failed, the Fiery Arrow Eagle immediately upgraded its next skill. The Fiery Arrow Eagle, previously soaring freely in the air, was still being buffeted by the scorching air currents, but this did not affect its resolve. Fiery Arrow with another cry, the Fiery Arrow Eagle seemed to be cheering itself up for the moment. Chapter 656 Ditto's Grievance. Fire Arrow. But as the Fiery Arrow Hawk's cry faded, a thrilling scene unfolded immediately after. The Fiery Arrow Hawk, whose wings were originally spread out and flapping constantly in an attempt to break free from the heat cage, unexpectedly folded its wings, and its entire body and wings were facing diagonally downward. It was like an arrow shot from a bow with its wings pointed downward. The sharp wings and its already streamlined body caused the Fiery Arrow Hawk to begin to slide downward at a rapid speed. However, no matter how fast the Fiery Arrow Hawk flew, it could not match the speed of the wind. The Fiery Arrow Hawk, which was sliding downward, only felt waves of heat coming from behind him, and Tracy felt like waves of flames burning on his body. You know, in addition to the flying attribute, the Fiery Arrow Hawk also has a second attribute, which is the fire attribute. It's more resistant to fire-type attacks than most Pokémon, but even Flamingo, under the relentless blast of scorching wind, finally let out a cry of pain. Its falling body was only slightly shaken by the strong wind. Flamingo felt itself lose consciousness, plummeting towards the volcanic crater. Oh no! Flamingo has lost its ability to fight at this moment. Yu couldn't help but panic. However, being in this state of fusion with Suicune didn't allow him to react as quickly as usual. By the time he realized what was happening, and wanted to rush out to protect Flamingo from harm, a petite figure had already rushed out, disappearing from Yu's sight. All he could see was a small black shadow. Buzzbat. It turned out to be Buzzbat, who also possessed the flying attribute. Upon seeing this, he unexpectedly took flight. Even without needing to feel it, Yu could tell by visual inspection that Buzzbat's flight speed had already surpassed its normal limits. But thinking about it, it wasn't so surprising. After all, it's only in times of greatest danger and difficulty that people unleash their potential, and Pokémon are no exception. While Buzzbat wasn't the one in danger, the Flaming Hawk, who was in danger, and Buzzbat, had a close relationship. It could be said that since Buzzbat was hatched from a Pokémon egg, Flaming Hawk had been responsible for Buzzbat's care, and most of its flying-type skills were taught by Flaming Hawk. If Buzzbat's trainer is like a parent to him, then Flaming Hawk as his mentor, the teacher who taught him his skills. Their bond transcended all else, forcing Buzzbat to disregard the danger and burst into unprecedented speed, simply to catch Flaming Hawk's falling form and catch it. Buzzbat, go ahead. Go, Buzzbat, go, hurry, hurry, hurry. Serena and the others were all apprehensive now, their hearts pounding with the sight of Flamahawk dropping from the sky. Their hearts practically raced with the two Pokémon. At this moment, Yu seemed to react. He couldn't just stand there and watch any longer. He had to take action, or else Moltres would attack again, and it would be troublesome. Suicune, use water cannon, Yu silently commanded, as if afraid of alerting the enemy. This command was transmitted to Suicune through synchronized telepathy. Without hesitation, Suicune's water bubbles had already been launched from his body upon receiving his trainer's command. The tacit cooperation between this person and pet went beyond verbal commands. They knew each other's intentions in a split second. This created the perfect timing for the battle. After all, the trainer was the Pokémon's eyes, but not the Pokémon's own body. But in the state of sync, Yu and Suicune were already inseparable. Each knew the other's thoughts instantly. Even later on, as soon as they had a thought, the other would instantly pick it up. Flame as expected, as Suicune fired his water cannon at Moltres. Moltres' attention was quickly drawn, and she turned away, ignoring the steadily falling Flamahawk. Ditto, what are you still standing there for? Go help Buzzbat. He's still so small, how could he possibly have the strength to lift Flamahawk? Yu commanded, while also observing the situation at Flamahawk's side. When Fu had swiftly grabbed Flamahawk, but perhaps because he hadn't grown up yet, or perhaps because he was too small, he lacked the strength. Even as he held Flamahawk in his tiny claws, Buzzbat continued to fall, though this time, his descent was certainly not as rapid as before. Seeing this situation, Yu, though somewhat anxious, was powerless. After all, he only had two flying Pokémon. Oh, and there was also Ditto, a creature that could transform into any Pokémon. He glanced over and saw Ditto. This kid was incredibly tactless. He was still standing there, blinking his small eyes at the struggling Buzzbat. If it weren't for the special state he was in, preventing him from being distracted, Yu would have probably kicked Ditto. Ditto roared at his trainer, suddenly aggrieved, tears welling in his small eyes. He looked at Yu as if to say, how can I blame myself for this? You were the one who told us to stand aside so as not to interfere with the battle between Suicune and Moltres, okay? Besides, I'm a very obedient Pokémon who always listens to my master, okay? How could I dare to do it without your instructions? What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and go. Yu was speechless and wanted to look up at the sky. What on earth was going on with this Ditto? If he hadn't warned me before, and now he had warned me again, it still stood there in a daze, motionless. Chapter 657 Flame. Very eager as if startled by Yu's words, Ditto didn't dare to hesitate even a moment. Hastily, with a twist of its body, a flash of light, Pidgeot soared once more into the air. Truly, Pidgeot lived up to its name as a flying-type Pokémon capable of Mach 2 speeds. In a mere blink of an eye, the flying Pokémon had already snatched up Buzzbat's slender wings with its sharp talons, sending it in Flamahawk-like flying. Alright, now that all the odds are out of the way, we can have a proper fight. Let's see what the legendary Moltres truly is. Seeing both Buzzbat and Flamahawk escape danger with the help of Ditto's transformation into Pidgeot, Yu finally relaxed. And with no more fear, his fighting spirit was unparalleled. Suicune, use water cannon, then freeze beam. Yu waved his hand with high spirits, issuing the command decisively. Flame, but Moltres was no pushover. Facing the combined attack of water cannon and freeze beam, it unleashed a powerful fire attack. In a split second, it completely obliterated the water cannon, engulfed by the freeze beam. Furthermore, Moltres finally stopped flapping its wings and assumed an offensive stance. With a gentle flap of its wings, it launched itself into flight. The sparks that gathered around its wings, due to their incredible speed, created a visible streak of fire, like a meteor from outer space. This Moltres is truly courageous, daring to engage me in close combat. Well, let me see the full power of your charged flame attack. Suicune, use water pillar tail, flame. As the charged flame attack drew closer, Moltres' form, enveloped in flames, became increasingly clear. Facing the resistance of water pillar tail, which suppressed its element, Moltres didn't hesitate at all. Like a meteorite, It charged towards the water pillar at breakneck speed. The instant its blazing flames made contact with the water pillar tail, white smoke billowed, and wisps of steam rose. The rising steam completely obscured Yu and Suicune's movements, including Moltres'. However, Moltres, trapped within the steam, seemed to possess clairvoyance, able to clearly detect Suicune's position. Under the impact of the charged flame attack, Suicune was sent careening backwards. What? Yu let out a startled cry, then involuntarily groaned, clutching his chest. What's going on? What on earth just happened? Yu was completely bewildered, completely unaware of what had happened. But the only thing he knew was that Suicune was probably in a very difficult situation. After all, with their minds connected, it was hard not to let him know. The intermittent pain in his body reminded Yu that if this continued, Suicune wouldn't be able to hold out much longer. Suicune, don't panic. Calm down. Use the surrounding water vapor to carefully sense where Moltres is, and then use water cannon. He forced himself to calm down. This wasn't the time to panic. If he panicked first, what would become of the Pokémon? And at that moment, a sudden flash of inspiration struck Yu. That's right, so that's what was going on. Then everything might finally make sense. It was just that this legendary beast, Moltres, was a bit unexpected. Surprisingly, quite clever. It turns out that Moltres, as a fire-type divine beast, has an innate sense of temperature. Even with the steam completely obscuring her vision, Moltres relied on her temperature sense to locate Suicune and decisively unleash her abilities. However, since the opponent could sense Suicune's presence through temperature, it meant that the Suicune had also leveraged their own stat advantages to pull the trigger. Sure enough, as Suicune fired his water cannon, Moltres' somewhat painful cry echoed through the steam. Well done, Suicune, that's it. As the steam began to dissipate over time, revealing the situation, Yu couldn't help but smile. He touched his forehead, sweating from the intense tension. But this weather is incredibly hot. Time to cool it down. Suicune, Gyarados, use rain. This time, Yu's order wasn't just for Suicune, but also for Gyarados. He was worried that Moltres' legendary status might extend the duration of the sunny spell. So, to be on the safe side, Yu had all his Pokémon with rain use it, attempting to alter the weather. However, events proved Yu's assumptions to be completely unfounded. With the two Pokémon's rain-beckoning abilities, the sky, once cloudless and breezy, suddenly felt scorching, like a scorching fire. Suddenly, dark clouds gathered, covering the once clear sky and obscuring the sun. A gentle rain soon began to fall. The raindrops hitting the ground sounded like music, creating a light and rhythmic sound. Perhaps due to the intense heat within the volcano, the raindrops occasionally emitted a sizzling, burning sound as they landed. Then, wisps of white smoke rose from the ground. Some raindrops even fell directly into the magma, emitting no sound at all, instantly vaporized by the scorching heat. The only peculiar thing was that when the raindrops generated by its skill hit Moltres, its flames remained unextinguished. Even at that moment, the flames burning on Charmeleon's tail seemed to have dimmed considerably, even due to the unique nature of its rain-calling skill. Perhaps this was the unique quality of Moltres. Otherwise, its flames wouldn't be used as a sacred flame during the opening ceremonies of various league tournaments in various regions of Japan. Chapter 658, Skill Competition. At this moment, even though the flames originally burning on Charmeleon's tail seemed significantly weaker due to its unique rain-begging skill. Perhaps this was precisely the uniqueness of the legendary Moltres. Otherwise, its flames wouldn't be used as sacred flames in the opening ceremonies of every league tournament in various regions of Japan. But Yu wasn't overthinking this. His mind was solely focused on taking advantage of this favorable weather to completely reverse his unfavorable situation. To achieve a comeback, a reversal of yin and yang. Great, this is exactly what I wanted. Feeling the raindrops hitting him, Yu felt for the first time that rain could actually be like this, a feeling of unprecedented joy that made him even more tempted to reach out and touch the rain. Fighting in the rain fully activates the water Pokémon's special abilities. Even if they don't, the power of water cannon in this situation is at least several times greater. Just as Yu had anticipated, under the effect of the special skill call for rain, Suicune's water cannon's locked-in attack increased several times over. The battle between water cannon and big fire alone showed that, even with its stat advantage, water cannon couldn't gain any advantage against big fire's attacks. But this time, it was different. Water cannon pierced through Big Fire's joints directly. Perhaps even I hadn't anticipated the sheer power of water cannon. Or perhaps I was overconfident in my Big Fire, not even dodging, and simply withstood the remaining force of water cannon. It's nothing truly worthy of being Moltres, seeing the water cannon blasting against Moltres' body. Aside from the fact that its power and level meant it couldn't immediately disable the opponent, the water cannon was still a water-type skill, and even hitting Moltres, a fire-type, it surprisingly felt nothing, its eagle eyes still piercing. Flame suddenly, Moltres was completely enraged. Perhaps it was anger, or perhaps Moltres simply disliked the horrific scene of begging for rain, but she cried out to the heavens, and the once dark sky immediately began to shimmer with sunlight. The clouds gradually lifted, and a clear sky appeared once again. Am I kidding? Why is my begging for rain only working for a short while? Yu scratched his hair in annoyance. This situation was truly a bit of a dilemma. Even though Suicune had mega evolved in the synchronized state with him, his combat power had barely reached the level of a king, having barely risen from the level of a quasi-king. But remember, the Moltres on the other side is a true near champion. The gap between them simply can't be bridged by a single mega evolution. In short, if one's own strength is insufficient, no method can fill that gap. Only with true strength can one possess the ability to overcome anything. But it would be a bit hard for me to give up just like that. In that case, please allow me to try again. Moltres, I have to admit you're very lucky. You're the first legendary Pokemon to experience Suicune's new special move, and only one of them. Suicune used Surf, then Freeze Beam. You knew that Suicune was no match for Moltres at this point, but even as a trainer, he couldn't bear to interrupt a battle between the two legendary Pokemon. So, he began to brainstorm, sifting through strategies one after another. Water Suicune roared to the heavens. And a raging wave of water suddenly formed from thin air, careening directly towards Moltres. The immense sound wave was so overwhelming that the mere formation of it blocked out the sun, completely enveloping Moltres. Flame, as if sensing the danger inherent in this skill, Moltres, already wary of Suicune and herself, became even more vigilant. Driven by caution, he unleashed Heat Wind, then combined it with Flame Vortex and Jet Flame. Jet Flame, spiraling forward, began to advance. With the aid of Heat Wind, the flame spun even faster, and if it weren't for its sheer size, it would have resembled a spinning top. At this moment, the swirling flames were like a drill, piercing through layers of air, leaving only a small opening in the center just wide enough for Moltres to pass through. Just as Moltres was reacting, Suicune unleashed his second skill. The frigid aura enveloped the waves created by the surf, moving in sync with a beam of light condensed by the freezing ray. The watery waves instantly froze into ice at a visible speed. Ultimately, they no longer resembled waves, but instead resembled an iceberg. Under the influence of the freezing ray, the iceberg formed by the surf, far from being affected by the freezing ray's transformation into ice and slowing its speed, instead slammed into Moltres with unparalleled force, gathering momentum. However, the spiraling jets of flame acted as a shield, slowing the iceberg's advance. There was even a slight resistance. However, the sheer size of the iceberg obstructed Suicune's vision, but it also served as a powerful defense. Under the scorching heat of the iceberg, the once seemingly solid iceberg, adorned with sharp icy needles, began to show signs of melting. Most seriously, the point where the spiraling jets of flame were directed was being penetrated, like a jackhammer. At first, it was only a shallow mark, but as the jets of flame continued to advance, the barrier within the iceberg gradually thinned. Chapter 659, Flamebird's Fury. As the area centered on the spiraling flames and the iceberg grew thinner and closer, Moltres flapped its flaming wings and let out a resounding cry. Before anyone could react, Moltres was once again engulfed in flames, its wings flapping vigorously, creating only a streak of fire. Moltres plunged directly into the spiraling vortex of flames, leaving only a path for its own form to pass through. Crack, crack, then, only a series of crisp sounds rang out. Before Yu and the other Pokemon could react, wondering what was happening, a section of the ice wall that had previously blocked Suicune's path suddenly shattered. Perhaps because the fire had melted the ice, Sophie's presence left no ice crystals to obscure Suicune and Yu's vision. All that was visible was Moltres' figure, growing larger and larger before the eyes of both the man and the pet, until it completely obscured their pupils. Before Suicune could react, he was sent flying backwards. Just as Yu was coming to his senses, He saw a figure growing larger and larger before his eyes. Finally, his vision went black, and it felt as if his body was no longer his own. He was flung backwards involuntarily. But the pain radiating from his chest made it clear he had been struck by an unknown force. Suppressing the slight pain, Yu gritted his teeth and pushed the object away from his face. The contact was cold and soft. Initially, Yu was puzzled, but after seeing the figure clearly, he was at a loss for words. He hadn't imagined that the skills he had simulated countless times in his mind and in reality could be broken by molters in this way. And judging by the situation, Suicune was seriously injured. After all, being in this synchronized state with Suicune, Yu could clearly sense Suicune's current condition. "Suicune, how are you? Can you still fight?" Yu, knowing Suicune's current condition, still asked out of respect for his Pokémon. Unexpectedly, after being pushed away, Suicune struggled to his feet. However, as he did so, visible sparks emanated from his body, burning it and instantly causing him to collapse to the ground. "What's going on?" Yu groaned, and his previously upright form sank back to his knees. Falling to one knee, Yu instinctively placed a hand on his slightly aching chest. If I saw correctly, molters must have used charged flame attack. But why was it so effective? Yu was still puzzled by the situation. In his mind, Suicune, facing the fire-type molters, would have the upper hand over the water-type Suicune. Even if molters was stronger than Suicune, shouldn't the water-type molters be more resistant to fire-type attacks? But the result was just like this. Sparks still flickered from Suicune's body, burning and scorching it. What Yu didn't know was that under normal circumstances, molters' fire-type attacks on Suicune might have resulted in the same effect as described above. However, when attacking Suicune, molters had already used several previous skills to raise the temperature of its flames to an incredible level. This single impact not only shattered the ice wall's defenses and offensive power, but also severely damaged Suicune. It was unclear whether molters' luck was good, or perhaps Suicune's luck was simply unfortunate, but with just this brief contact, Suicune triggered the extremely rare burning state. Perhaps due to the severity of the injury, Suicune had already Mega evolved, revealing his true form. "Suicune, are you alright?" Yu asked, even though he was in the previous synchronization state. Because of Suicune, he felt the pain of the burning state. But it was ultimately just a telepathic connection, not actual physical contact. Yuyu's injuries weren't as severe as Suicune's. After channeling his inner energy to suppress the pain, he crouched beside Suicune. He even pulled a burning potion from his storage ring and sprayed it on the burned areas of Suicune's body. Flame, meanwhile, as Yu worried about Suicune's injuries, Molters clearly wasn't about to let the group of people and Pokémon go. After all, not to mention the fact that these people had unnecessarily disturbed its slumber within the lava, the inexplicable fight alone had already irritated it to the point of wanting to burn them all to ashes. After all, if anyone was dragged into a fight for no apparent reason, and then injured, it would be a wonder that the Pokémon and person didn't go mad. This would be fine if they had no strength, but with it, there was no point in forcing them to attack. Just as Yu, distracted by Suicune's injury, was about to be struck by the oncoming jet of flame, a petite figure stepped forward, blocking both Yu and Suicune. Then, it wasn't just it, figures appeared alongside it, forming a shield wall, tightly protecting Yu and Suicune. Violent 100,000-volt surges, icy freezing beams, destructive ray of destruction. A variety of skills followed, each aimed directly at the oncoming jet of flame, which was like a fiery snake. However, as the saying goes, 3 heads are better than 1. While your Pokémon, including Pikachu, aren't as powerful as Molters, the combined power of their skills is enough to cause Molters a headache and a threat. This resulted in the two sides engaging in a fierce duel of skills. Molters, on the other hand, became even more enraged, its sharp eyes filled with blazing rage. This was the look of someone who wanted to burn the enemy to ashes, yet was helpless to do anything about it. Chapter 660 Tornado. Molters, however, grew even more enraged, its piercing eyes blazing with fury. It was the look of someone who wanted to incinerate their enemy, yet felt helpless. Meanwhile, Yu had just finished examining Suicune's injuries and applying the burn medicine. Now, he had the energy and focus to face the legendary beast, Molters, who had defeated Suicune. Don't be so complacent, Molters. The battle has only just begun, Clearly, Yu had misunderstood. He had mistaken Moltres' anger and rage for her triumph over her victory over a fellow legendary beast, Suicune. However, while Yu didn't understand Moltres' meaning, she had grasped the meaning of the human's words, and thus, it grew even more irritable and furious. The temperature of the air around it seemed to rise with its rising emotions. Without mercy, it unleashed its heat wind ability, the third of its flame wings, once again. Yu could clearly sense that the scorching wind was not only much stronger than before, but even the power inherent in the skill itself had increased. It didn't matter, with just that single blow, the tiny buzzbit, still fluttering in the air, was instantly sent flying, as if weightless. If Yu hadn't been quick to snatch it up, it would have taken a whopping 18,000 miles to find it. Besides Buzzbit, Pikachu, with quick eyes and hands, dodged behind Gyarados, escaping the attack. Thus, all the Pokémon present relied on their physical strength to avoid being blown away. However, in addition to the gale-like force of the wind, they also had to contend with the immense power inherent in the scorching wind. It's worth noting that the only 5 Pokémon capable of fighting remained on the field: Charmeleon, Gyarados, Pikachu, Ditto, and Skaven. But as the saying goes, it's better to lose the battle than the battle itself, especially since their side outnumbered the other side. It was simply their weaker strength that made them seem less impressive. But together, they could at least hold their own against Moltres. Pikachu, then use 100,000 volts, Gyarados and Skaven use water cannon for a cross attack. Yu intended to exploit his stat advantage this time. He dispatched Pikachu and 2 water-type Pokémon for harassment, while simultaneously seizing the opportunity to launch the main attack. Flame Moltres seemed enraged, its chirping shrilly. As Zhou Shen flapped his wings, the flames grew stronger and stronger. A swirling barrier of flames once again blocked all 3 of its countering abilities. At the same time, a look of human disdain lingered in his eyes, and he casually flapped his wings, as if nothing had happened. The sarcasm contained in this was self-evident, and Yu, with his sharp eyesight, naturally took in every glimpse of my demeanor. He gnashed his teeth in rage. Well, I never thought I'd been so brave and fearless, but now I'm being mocked by a Pokémon, even though it's a legendary beast. Flame. As if to make its provocation obvious, Moltres even gently flapped its flaming wings in the direction where Yu and the others were standing, sending wisps of flame directly towards Yu. Has this Moltres become a spirit? It actually dares to provoke people? But you're truly too annoying. Even if you were a divine beast, today I'll pluck all your feathers. Let you experience the feeling of a fallen phoenix being no match for a chicken. Gyarados uses Rain Call, then Storm. And Ditto transforms into Gyarados. Then uses Storm as well. It was clear from this that Yu was about to unleash his ultimate move. But thinking about it, it made perfect sense. In this situation, if he didn't unleash his ultimate move now, when would he? It really had to be said that the current situation at the crater was perfectly suited to using Storm and Rain Call. Previously, when Yu had Gyarados perform this combo, either there were too many onlookers, or the surrounding terrain hindered the full potential of the move. But now it was different. Aside from the magma within, the crater was nothing but jagged, uneven rocks, a bare expanse. Furthermore, the surrounding area was spacious, so there was no need to worry about accidentally injuring anyone with the skill. Soon, the once clear sky was once again overcast. A gentle raindrop from Zalulu dripped down continuously, and to Yu, it sounded like nature's most beautiful music, bringing an involuntary smile to his face. The wind, whether due to the weather or the skill, initially blew lightly, but gradually grew stronger and stronger, until it formed a visible torrential downpour that completely obscured everyone's view. Looking down from the sky, one could see the swirling wind, like a spiral pillar supporting the heavens and the earth. Combined with the raindrops, which had grown larger and larger since then, the wind was truly majestic. Raindrops as large as buckets slammed into the storm, but instead of dissipating into thin air due to their sharpness, they gradually merged, forming a veritable tornado. The mere whirlwind evoked the roar of a dragon and the howl of a tiger. Even Moltres, seemingly flapping its wings effortlessly, suddenly wore a solemn expression as it watched the scene unfold, a scene resembling a natural disaster. The magma within the crater, seemingly unable to bear the sight, suddenly began to boil, bubbles bursting from the intense heat like boiling water. It felt as if the volcano could erupt at any moment. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 661 Addendum. What a powerful tornado. Could this be the true strength of EU and their Pokémon? It seems my earlier plan was a winner. Amen's eyes flickered. Ever since Moltres had appeared, Amen's initial excitement had faded, and instead, he had become incredibly calm. He also began to slowly incline backwards. Because Amen was already rather small, this slow movement allowed him to hide perfectly behind the human wall formed by his son and 3 daughters. While no one noticed him, he suddenly pulled items from his backpack. Although he still felt a lingering fear from the tornado, even trembling with dread under its might, he couldn't conceal the sinister, chilling aura he exuded. However, due to the intense battle, the attention of Xiaoxia and the other daughters, Yu, and the Pokémon was completely distracted. No one noticed Amen's subtle movements. Meanwhile, Amen was carefully carrying out his plan. The battlefield at the center of the crater had also undergone a new transformation. Facing the overwhelmingly powerful and formidable tornado, Moltres, with all due dignity, chose not to retreat. Instead, she employed her energy feast, just as she had before, enveloping herself in flames. As if this flaming technique could provide Moltres with sufficient safety, it proved insufficient in the face of harsh reality. Under the tornado's furious force, it unnoticed, creating a curtain of water around it. However, due to the incredibly high temperature within the crater, the moment it came into contact with the frigid water, clouds of steam immediately erupted. Even from a distance, Yu could sense the warmth emanating from the steam carried by the aftermath of the battle. Yet, the numerous obstacles and difficulties she faced did not slow Moltres' forward momentum. A sharp glint flickered in her eyes. Yu was well aware of the meaning contained in that look. He had seen it before, both in himself and in his angry darling. It was a look that spoke of an unyielding spirit, a courageous fight against all odds. The charged flames traced a graceful arc in mid-air, impacting the tornado like a burst of fireworks. It presented its most beautiful side to the world, as if its own life were about to wither away. While the tornado before it might threaten Moltres, to say it could completely threaten her was a bit of an exaggeration. As expected, as it plunged fully into the tornado, the dazzling flames remained remarkably conspicuous, a beacon guiding the way above the sea amidst the pitch-black raindrops. Flame Moltres, now completely immersed in the tornado, displayed an undeniably handsome and elegant air. But after this pretense, Moltres was completely stumped. The tornado's impact was so powerful that Moltres could only barely force its way inside, aided by its charged flame attack. Trying to escape again was truly impossible. After several fruitless attempts, Moltres seemed to have completely given up on forcing its way out. It calmed down and slowly flapped its wings. At that moment, Moltres, trapped within the tornado, seemed to blend in with the surrounding wind. If it weren't for the lingering flicker of flames clinging to its skin, Yu would have suspected Moltres had vanished into thin air. What's this trick up their sleeve? Yu frowned, wondering what Moltres was up to. While the tornado was powerful enough to trap Moltres, Yu's Pokémon couldn't use their abilities to penetrate the tornado and attack Moltres within. However, precisely because tornado is a combination of storm and storm, it still possesses the attributes of both. This gave Pichu an opportunity, and he launched a 100,000-volt attack directly at the tornado. The sky, once overcast with clouds, suddenly became filled with lightning and thunder, and bolts as thick as buckets lashed down from the sky. As soon as a few bolts landed on the tornado, it was no longer the same tornado. Lightning flashed and crackled around it, and the streaks of electricity resembled tiny earthworms, each flash evoking a chill. It turned out that tornado's weakness was that it could only block attacks, not launch attacks. Yu had been constantly refining it. Even now, although he still couldn't use his skills to attack through tornado, he did discover that he could use other skills to launch attacks with additional attributes. For example, at this moment, with 100,000 volts, under the influence of lightning, every time a tornado rotates, it carries the force of lightning. Therefore, through this conduction, Pokémon trapped within it will suffer damage. Of course, this damage doesn't happen overnight, it must accumulate gradually. This depends on the duration of the tornado. It's not just because the duration is too short, or because there's been incomplete research. Yu has even considered adding icy power in addition to the electromagnetic force of lightning. This could involve having water-type Pokémon like Gyarados or Nautilus use Freeze Ray. This would not only have the cold effect, but the low temperature could even condense ice crystals or shards. Within the tornado's reach, even the smallest object could be devastated. Moltres, currently trapped within the tornado, experienced this all too well. Gently flapping its wings, because of its inherent flying attribute, it felt a strong storm blowing around it. At first, Moltres didn't take it seriously, thinking that this was just to trap it and had no other effect. Chapter 662, Divine Bird Agent. Gently flapping its wings, Moltres, thanks to its inherent flying-type nature, felt the intense wind whipping around it. Initially, Moltres was unconcerned, believing it was merely trapped and harmless. But what it experienced next completely overturned its assumptions. This tingling sensation was far from harmless. It was almost exhilarating, nearly causing it to collapse from midair. Initially, it felt only a tingling sensation, but the more it continued, the more it sensed something was amiss. Moltres could sense the aura irritated, enveloping it. This was an electric-type Pokémon's unique resistance to flying-type Pokémon. So, while Moltres didn't notice it at first, the pain grew. It realized it couldn't remain trapped in the tornado for long, or its combat effectiveness would be severely sapped. Therefore, upon realizing something was amiss, Moltres launched into full-scale attack. He knew full well that a tornado-like force like the fourth would be impossible to break out of. The surrounding winds were simply too strong. They were countless times stronger than when he had rushed in. Glancing around, Moltres suddenly had an unrealistic idea. Though uncertain about its feasibility, desperate to escape the tornado's encirclement, Moltres flapped her wings without a second thought and soared into the sky. It seemed she was planning to break out through the gap above. However, as mentioned earlier, from above, the tornado looked like a spiraling column between heaven and earth. Its height certainly couldn't be very low. And don't think ascending would be easy, the tornado's resistance was immense. The constant gusts of wind, fueled by lightning, blew inward. But Moltres was Moltres, worthy of its title as a divine beast. The scene that followed, in particular, showcased its divine beast's aura to the fullest. Moltres, using a charged flame attack, began charging upward. Initially, the wind's resistance made it seem uncertain how to move forward or backward. Flame, but it quickly regained its composure, letting out a cry as if it had entered a second stage of flight, accelerating at the instant it passed the second stage. Moltres instantly broke free from the razor-sharp speed of that space, soaring skyward with unstoppable momentum, rapidly approaching the center of the tornado. And, due to Moltres' instantaneous acceleration, at the moment of its rapid increase in speed, a blazing flame erupted from that small spatial node. And with the force of justice, it spread across the entire tornado. The lightning power that had previously clung to the tornado was now consumed by the flames. The visible speed of justice was gradually dissipated, leaving only a fiery tornado, devoid of a trace of electrical arcs. No, we can't let Moltres break out. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble. Gyarados, go ahead. Use Destruction Beam to block the mouth of the tornado. Pikachu, use your 100,000 volts at full power. And Scave, use Destruction Beam as well. Yu, unable to defeat Moltres even with his Pokémon combined, could only rely on Tornado's strength to fight Moltres. Therefore, he wouldn't let Moltres break free from the tornado's constraints. But again, the potential and fighting instincts of the legendary beasts were unimaginable. Just as Moltres used Charged Flame attack and was about to approach the opening above the tornado, just as Gyarados and the other Pokémon were about to bombard it, Moltres, already flying at high speed, instantly doubled its speed. Its speed was so great that it was enveloped in a layer of blue light, as if it had broken free from its constraints. And with just these 3 stages of acceleration, not only did it successfully escape the tornado, but it also completely avoided the destructive Death Beam and the 100,000 volt attack. Fuck, are you kidding me? Aren't they said that mythical beasts are extremely peace-loving? But why do I feel like this Moltres has such a high fighting instinct? Not only can it use the 3 stages of acceleration, but it even uses a powerful flying skill like Divine Bird Agent. Yu's jaw dropped in shock, his eyes twitching. Clearly, he had misjudged the skill Moltres used later. But that was precisely why he couldn't help but twitch. Surely, Moltres was using a powerful flying skill like Divine Bird Agent simply to accelerate its escape. It was truly a waste of talent. But what he saw next made him completely forget those words. Moltres, having used Divine Bird Agent to escape the tornado, was now gathering momentum, showing no sign of relinquishing Divine Bird Agent after its successful escape. With an awe-inspiring aura, Moltres, using the Divine Bird's special powers, grew larger and larger before everyone's eyes. Even from a short distance, Xiaoxu could sense the terrifying aura emanating from it. Pikachu Gyarados Lee's giant claws seeing Moltres charging towards them. The more powerful Pokémon, led by Pikachu, reacted quickly, stepping forward to block their trainer's path. Forming a single line, from a distance, they resembled a jagged wall. Clearly, the Pokémon felt the might emanating from Moltres. Although they were unsure they could withstand the attack, they charged forward without hesitation, determined to protect their trainer from harm. However, it was unclear what their motivation was. Under normal circumstances, facing an attack from such a powerful Pokémon, this was a situation they would have considered unpredictable. Not to mention letting his Pokémon stand in front of him, Yu would probably rush forward first, intending to use his own flesh and blood to withstand the attack that could threaten his Pokémon. Chapter 663 Danger. Flame Moltres was creeping closer and closer. While it didn't have a fire-type skill like Charged Flame Attack, the heat of its flames could be felt from afar. Pikachu Gyarados Giant Claws Riza meanwhile, the Pokémon, led by Pikachu, were all charging their own skills, preparing to deal with the incoming damage from the legendary bird. Gyarados, the idiot, had to be mentioned here. Pikachu and the others were all charging their skills, aiming for maximum effect and power when they finally came out. But when it came to Gyarados, everything changed. It was indeed charging its own skills, but the name of the skill it was charging was now hardened. It seemed Gyarados had a pretty good grasp of its role, even though it had both damage and resistance. Overall, it probably had the highest defense of the entire team, so it decided to give up its DPS role and become a tank. After all, there were already 3 other Pokémon on the attack, so one more wouldn't be too much, and none would be too little. But when it came to defense, it was a completely different story. It could be said that among the 4 Pokémon, all but this one were fragile. It took no one to use the hardening technique, but from Yuyu's perspective, he could see that the scales on Gyarados' body were actually beginning to glow. Flame at that moment, Moltres' Divine Bird Agent was finally approaching. It was getting closer, so close that Yuyu could even see the glow emanating from its body after using its skills. Yuyu also felt the immense power contained in this attack, but if he wasn't silently channeling his internal energy to form a protective shield around himself, anyone who didn't know would have thought he was completely frightened. Come on, there's no retreat. Only forward. Pikachu unleashed a long accumulated 100,000 volts of lightning, blasting it from its tiny frame. The ferocious force of lightning was terrifying. Following closely behind, the death-inspiring destruction ray followed. Then, an equally searing jet of flames. Skill after skill was unleashed, each possessing unprecedented power. Despite this barrage of attacks, Moltres seemed oblivious, charging forward relentlessly. However, because the 3 skills launched in a horn-like fashion, even Moltres' speed blocked its path. However, Moltres wisely chose the weaker Destruction Ray, charging forward relentlessly. The moment the Destruction Ray and the Statue of the Dragon attacked joint forces, it could be seen being pushed back at a visible speed by the Statue of the Dragon. Even within this, the crab was struggling to hold on. Taking advantage of this moment of struggling, Pikachu and Charmeleon quickly responded, redirecting their abilities and striking once again at Agent Bird. However, facing the countering effect of 100,000 volts, the initial effect was noticeable. However, as time went on, the power of 100,000 volts seemed to weaken. In the end, it seemed to adapt to the power and siege of the 3 abilities. Moltres' Agent Bird continued its attacks, but this time, it managed to swerve, instantly dislodging all 3 attacks. Afterward, Moltres' Agent Bird continued its attack. Strangely, Moltres' target was no longer the Pokémon. Instead, it targeted the trainer. Just as Pikachu and the other Pokémon quickly rushed to protect the trainer, Moltres' speed was superior, and it had already reached the others. However, just as Yuyu was mobilizing all his internal energy, preparing to withstand the attack, even at the risk of serious injury, Moltres quickly flew past Yuyu, as if it hadn't noticed him. In nature, all creatures possess spiritual psychics, let alone the inherently intelligent Pokémon. As a legendary beast, Moltres was a true leader, its intelligence naturally not low. It could immediately discern that Yuyu was the most formidable of the group, and rather than risking unknown consequences, it preferred to err on the side of safety. It targeted human trainers it considered weaker. Naturally, the so-called inner trainers Moltres chose weren't the most formidable Yu, nor the seemingly fragile Serena and her 3 daughters, but rather Amen, a Pokemon photographer who had only known Yu and his companions for a day or less. As for why, it was obvious. It was because Amen had disturbed its slumber within the volcanic Dragon River. If it could speak at this moment, it would surely say, "Why attack him? That's nonsense. Who told you he's the most cowardly of them all? And he's hiding behind 3 little girls, making him look like an easy target." As if sensing danger, Amen, who had been tinkering with something behind Xiaoxu, finally raised his head. But the moment Gangai looked over, a look of horror immediately crossed his face. What was going on? Had he been discovered? Why was that Moltres heading towards him? But it was too late for Amen to ponder. He instinctively glanced around, hoping to find anything that might help him. Glancing around, Amen was despairingly surprised to find nothing besides the 3 little girls. Of course, Yu was still rushing towards him. But by the time he arrived, the flowers would be cold and the grass on his grave would be a foot tall. As Amen's search proved fruitless, the Moltres drew closer. At this moment, Amen looked at Xiaoxu, who was only an arm's length away from him. His panicked eyes were suddenly replaced by a sinister look. "You dare to come towards me? Then go ahead." Chapter 664 Extreme Rescue. At this moment, Amen looked at Xiaoxu, who was only an arm's length in front of him. His panicked eyes were suddenly replaced by a sinister glint. "You dare to come at me? Then go ahead." Xiaoxu, still dazed by the power of Moltres, suddenly felt her body lighten, as if propelled forward by something. She let out a slightly terrified cry. Xiaoxu, Yu, who was already hurrying back, couldn't help but shout out after seeing this, his eyes filled with disbelief. Even though Yu had been extremely wary of Amen from the beginning, he had never expected Amen to be so bold as to do something like this. Was it because my fists were too weak, or had I lost my intimidating power? How could that guy dare? Even as Yu's thoughts raced back, his pace didn't falter, but instead quickened. In just a few breaths, it reached Xiaoxu's side, even surpassing Moltres by a few points due to its sudden burst of energy. Just as Yu arrived, Moltres' divine bird agent had also arrived. Without hesitation, Yu stepped forward, using his massive frame to block Xiaoxu. However, perhaps sensing their trainer's danger, or perhaps influenced by their trainer's influence, the Pikachu and the others, upon realizing Moltres wasn't targeting them, all rushed back. Ultimately, Pikachu, renowned for its speed, reached back first. Just as Moltres' divine bird agent was about to collide with Yu, Pikachu's Volt attack followed closely behind. Engulfed in lightning, it formed a stark contrast to Moltres, but the violent force of the lightning passed through Pikachu and directly impacted Moltres. This caused Moltres' divine bird agent, which had been moving forward without interruption, to pause briefly. Despite its stand restrained, Moltres' level was simply too high. When Volt's attack and Strix's special attack collided, there was a brief pause before Pikachu was sent flying backwards at an even faster speed than before. Did he think that was the end? Not really. Even after Volt's attack dealt with Pikachu, his speed didn't seem to slow down at all, continuing to charge towards his trainer with unstoppable force. But just then, Moltres, soaring forward and on the verge of knocking his trainer back, felt his vision go dark as a massive beast suddenly appeared before him. Gyarados. Finally, Gyarados arrived. Initially lagging behind, Gyarados took advantage of the moment when Moltres' attack was paused by Pikachu to rush to his aid, and in that crucial moment, it finally caught up. Without hesitation, Gyarados, upon entering the fray, immediately stretched its body, transforming into a wall of flesh. The reflective scales, gleaming in the sunlight, now revealed Moltres' form with uncanny clarity. Bang! Moltres tried to gesture a direction to avoid Gyarados, but it was too late. The divine bird agent instinctively slammed into Gyarados' sturdy body. The dull thud of flesh colliding with flesh resonated like thunder from nowhere, resonating directly in everyone's ears. The explosion from this single collision was like a miniature storm. While Gyarados' presence completely thwarted Moltres' attack, the explosive force of the collision was so immense that it sent gusts of wind blowing. Yu and Xiaozu, protected by Gyarados, bore the brunt of the impact. However, Yu, a martial artist, was fortunate. His physique was formidable, and his footwork was stable. Therefore, under the constant blast of wind, Only her clothes rustled. As for Xiaoxu, she was completely lacking such strength. Her already fragile frame, combined with a blast of wind, made her feel her body being involuntarily pulled backwards. Confused by the violent blast, Xiaoxu instinctively tried to grab onto something to steady herself. Yu then realized Xiaoxu's predicament was amiss. He stabilized himself in the Mangshi area and reached out to grab Xiaoxu, pulling her into his arms. However, just as their hands were about to make contact, Xiaoxu, too fragile, was sent flying backwards by the impact of the second explosion. It's worth noting that as the battle continued, Yu and the others who were watching had shifted their positions countless times, simply to avoid being caught in the crossfire. Consequently, Xiaoxu and the others were standing with their backs to the crater. In other words, this blast was truly formidable. Xiaoxu's body was carried directly into the crater. The scorching heat of the lava reflected on her face, turning her a brilliant red. Yu followed closely behind, even using the aftermath of the blast to increase his speed. Just as Xiaoxu was about to fall into the crater, he rushed forward and embraced her. With only a few centimeters remaining, Yu forced himself to stabilize himself, even wrapping one arm around Xiaoxu's waist and, with the other, grasping the Yejio spear he had taken out mid-flight, stabbing it fiercely into the rock. However, his strike was too hasty, and he didn't carefully consider the correct spot. Although the Yejio spear embedded itself into the rock wall, perhaps due to bad luck, the spot where Yu and Xiaoxu were standing immediately caused the ground to collapse. Without realizing it, they both plummeted downwards. At this moment, the figure of the fire dinosaur suddenly appeared in Yu's sight. He saw that the fire dinosaur was still flying forward with its claws stretched out, but this time, because it had no target at all, the fire dinosaur completely missed and fell directly to the ground, quietly stuck next to the Yejio gun. Chapter 665, Fire Dinosaurs Pounce. Charmeleon was still poised to leap forward, claws outstretched, but this time, lacking a target, its attack missed completely, crashing down to rest on the rock beside the acorn gun. The light that had once shone in Charmeleon's large eyes gradually dimmed, and despair filled its eyes as it watched the figure disappear from sight. Self-blame clung to it. He had watched helplessly as his trainer, along with the young lady who usually served as their poop shoveler, plunged into the lava. How could he be so useless? If he could only fly, he would surely have saved his master. Why was he so weak? He had reached the final step, just one step away from evolving. Yet, after all this waiting, there was still no hope. Self-blame raged in Charmeleon's heart, mostly out of frustration with his lack of strength. But even more than that, he felt a sense of powerlessness in the face of the current situation, unable to fly. And more than that, like a reel, memories of his past with Yu flashed through Charmeleon's mind. From the time he was still a Charmander, his previous trainer despised him for being weak. Only his current trainer didn't despise him. Not only that, he had taken him in, brought him home, and taught him countless things. This, in turn, gave him his current abilities and strength. No, I can't just sit there and wait for death. I must save my master. Even if it means risking my life, I must save my master. Master, please wait a moment. Slowly, Charmeleon's eyes were completely engulfed in red. Looking closely, it wasn't the color of blood, but rather flames. Burning and pulsing. A furious roar echoed, accompanied by a burst of flames that shot up into the sky. The Charmeleon, originally sprawled on the ground, didn't even stand up. Instead, it crawled flat on its hands and knees, thrusting its powerful hind legs against the ground, and leaped forward. The flames burning on its tail gradually grew stronger, growing from a fist-sized flame to a flame the size of a head. Lizzie Charmeleon's roar grew louder, even taking on a ferocious edge. Charmeleon, its body was plummeting, but Yu still held Xiaoxu tightly in his arms, fearing she might get hurt. Seeing Charmeleon leap down right after it, Yu couldn't help but shout out in worry, his eyes filled with concern for Charmeleon. If it had evolved into Charizard, it would be fine, at least it would have wings. But it was still in Charmeleon's state. Jumping down would mean almost certain death, except for a bit of luck, right? However, compared to the incredibly active thoughts between Yu and Charmeleon, Xiaoxu, one of the parties involved, was largely free of such thoughts. Feeling the warmth of Yu's embrace, Xiaoxu felt an inexplicable surge of happiness. Even if at any moment they could plunge into the lava and be reduced to ashes, at this moment, Xiaoxu felt a happiness she hadn't felt in decades. Yu, quietly, she poked her little head out of Yu's arms. Yu's beautiful eyes gazed at him intently, as if he wanted to imprint his image in his mind, allowing him to remember him and meet him again in his next life. A few sparkling tears glimmered in the corners of Xiaoxu's eyes, a look of poignant tenderness and pathos. But it was understandable. Faced with such a crisis, what girl wouldn't scream and burst into tears? Especially for a girl as fragile as Xiaoxu, it was a blessing to see tears glisten without actually crying. Feeling his body falling without resistance, and the burning sensation behind him becoming increasingly intense, Yu couldn't help but feel a surge of anxiety. Because of the earlier wind and the sudden collapse of the rock face, they had fallen far beyond the surrounding rock wall for support, leaving them completely suspended in midair. This was Yu's situation. Although he possessed immense internal energy, he had no way to utilize it. He couldn't possibly perform a water walk. Not only was the lava different from water, but even a simple step on it, even a quick, skimming leap like a dragonfly, would likely scorch his feet in the next moment. The fragrant aroma of barbecue wafted through the air. And to top it all off, Yu wasn't alone. He was also holding Xiaoxu in his arms. Although Xiaoxu was delicate and lightweight, the added gravity she brought was enough to cause Yu a headache. The unique skill of floating on water was probably unattainable. It was already a good thing that he wasn't quickly crushed into the molten lava and dissolved into ash. Zha, hurry up, I must catch up with my master. I must protect my master. In the past, my master protected the weak me. Now it's my turn to protect it, the Charmeleon, following closely behind, roared. But there was a hint of resentment and a yearning for power. Charmeleon, the Charmeleon's roar rang out, naturally drawing the attention of Yu and Xiaozu. At this moment, despite the extremely dangerous situation, Yu suddenly felt the speed of the falling objects around him slow down. He was so close to the Charmeleon, falling behind him. So close. Seeing each other, he could almost clearly feel the calmness in each other's hearts, which had been restless. One person and one pet, their eyes met. Each read the words that the other wanted to express in their eyes. The glance they shared seemed like a fleeting moment, yet also like several seasons. In the end, the scene seemed frozen in time, as if it were eternal, with only the time slowly passing by them. Chapter 666 Evolution. In the end, the scene seemed frozen in time, as if for eternity, leaving only the slow passage of time. At that moment, Charmeleon's roar affected not only Yu but also the Pokémon who had fought alongside him, and the beautiful young lady who usually cared for him alongside his master. And of course, the opponent it had just fought. It seemed as if it was startled by Charmeleon's roar, or perhaps curious about the meaning of Charmeleon's roar. After sending Yu and Xiaoxu flying off the cliff, Moltres, perhaps having achieved its goal or perhaps frightened by what it had just done, stopped attacking. Instead, Moltres paused. Its eyes, seemingly flickering with flames, watched with curiosity as the two creatures and their pet gradually fell into the lava. As if unable to interrupt the spectacle, it made no move to help Charmeleon rescue Yu and the others. It showed no desire to continue the fight, simply flapping its wings quietly, hovering in midair, watching the unfolding events. The previously tense battle suddenly became strangely quiet, as if frozen in time, a scene that remained constant. Charmeleon's roar echoed once more, though this time it wasn't just him. Charmeleon, Yu roared back, tears welling up in his eyes. If Yu hadn't held him close, allowing him to see more clearly, Xiaoxu wouldn't have even noticed. After all, their descent, while not fast, was not slow either. Combined with the heat radiating from the lava floor, the tears clinging to Yu's eyes evaporated instantly. Zha, Master, wait a moment, I'm coming right over. Hearing Yu's cry, Charmeleon thought it was his master calling him, dreading the situation he would face next. Therefore, to comfort its master, Charmeleon also roared. Immediately following this roar, Charmeleon's body transformed, completely enveloping it in a burst of light tinged with violent energy. Charmeleon was clearly worried that its speed wouldn't decrease quickly enough, preventing it from catching up with its master. It even charged forward with a charged flame attack, a sight that made Yu's mouth twitch. I've seen people reckless, but I've never seen one as reckless as you. Are you rushing to die, or are you anxious to be reborn? No, if I manage to survive this time, I'm going to have to give Pikachu and the others some serious psychological counseling. Life is hard-earned, Cherish it. Love the life you have. How can you just jump into lava so easily like everyone else? But as time went on, Yu felt something was getting more and more off-kilter, his brows furrowing involuntarily. He even chose to temporarily forget that he was in danger of falling. That's because Charmeleon's performance was truly surprising. At the beginning, Charmeleon did indeed use Charged Flame attack. Its sudden acceleration was clearly noticeable during its descent. But later on, things started to feel off. Because the distance between them was getting closer, Yu could clearly feel the heat of the flames generated by Charged Flame attack at first. But later on, the heat grew weaker and weaker, almost as if it were non-existent. Don't ask why, even in this situation, it could still be felt so clearly. Even if you ask, I won't tell you. Furthermore, the orange-yellow glow of Charged Flame attack now had a faint tinge of light blue. Furthermore, the flames, once blazing, now felt warm. It was like being in a warm embrace, temporarily forgetting one's worries and pain. Could this be an evolution? Oh my god, it's such a coincidence. Charmeleon chose this time to evolve, because Charmeleon had been raised by Yu since Charmander. Yu had witnessed its growth throughout its life, especially Charmeleon's evolution, which was particularly fresh in his memory. After all, it was precisely because of that evolution that Charmeleon's current mutated form emerged. He hadn't expected it to evolve into Charizard, but the situation was similar to the previous mutation. So, he could honestly assume that Charmeleon's mutated form would remain with him for the rest of his life. It wasn't that Yu disliked Charmeleon's mutated form or had any opinions about it. It was mainly because of the current situation. No, to be more precise, the number of Charmeleons that had mutated from then until now was extremely small, so rare that one could count them on one's fingers. They were incredibly rare, even rarer than Pokémon. Yu was mainly worried that Charmeleon wouldn't be able to accept its uniqueness, and might even be unable to find a mate because of its bizarre mutation. Yu figured he'd have to forcibly capture a female Charizard and pair up with it. Otherwise, Charmeleon would be too pitiful and lonely. Yu's thoughts were correct. Charmeleon's strength had already reached critical mass, just missing that crucial point. After this incident, its potential had been fully unleashed, and it was evolving. As Yu was daydreaming, the fire dragon, enveloped in light, began to shine. Its shrouds flickered, and even though it was still daytime, it was dazzling. A crimson energy gathered around Charmeleon. This was due to the high concentration of fire energy in the crater. Visible streams of red light began to envelop the shrouded Charmeleon. At this moment, the fire dinosaur was still a little confused. Although he was puzzled by the warmth all over his body and it was a little strange, the only thing on his mind was to rescue his master, even if it meant risking his own life. Chapter 667 Xiaoxi's Thoughts. Just like that, Charmeleon was completely unaware of the light of evolution, which enveloped Charmeleon's body and began to transform its appearance. By the time Charmeleon had reacted, the light of evolution had dissipated, revealing a brand new Pokémon. The evolved Charmeleon was a bipedal Pokémon with Western Dragon characteristics. Its skin was primarily orange, a slightly lighter shade than Charmeleon's, with a cream-colored hue from its abdomen to the tip of its tail and the soles of its feet. It had short, stocky legs and relatively slender arms, each endowed with 3 sharp claws. Its feet also had 3 sharp claws. Unlike its pre-evolutionary predecessor, Charizard possessed enormous wings on its back, capable of flight. The inner side of its wings was a bluish-green color, with a horn-like protrusion at the 3rd joint. It had a long neck, small blue eyes, and 2 horn-like protrusions on the back of its head. Like its pre-evolutionary predecessor, its long, thick tail was tipped with flames. Compared to regular Charizard, the one that appeared before Yu was noticeably larger. Furthermore, it inherited the mutated form of the previous Charizard. Unlike a regular Charizard, the evolved Charizard's original flame armor continued to spread, covering its body. The flame mark on its forehead became more pronounced, while the flaming patterns on its hands and feet began to spread upward, eventually transforming into a pattern resembling armor, with intermittent flickers of flame. However, this wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was Charizard's wings. As they flapped, they resembled 2 balls of flame, their flame patterns clearly covering the 2 massive wings, as if sparks were being flung out with every flap. Wow, I didn't expect this Charizard to be so handsome again. Love it, love it. Yu was completely oblivious to the danger, his eyes sparkling as he watched Charizard, now rapidly flying towards them, awaiting its next flap of wings. Meanwhile, the Dragon Knight had just realized what was happening, still a bit dazed. Seeing the Charizard, now no longer in its original form, he roared in fear. His previously stable flight suddenly began to falter, swaying from side to side. Yu was furious and terrified. He feared Charizard would lose its balance and crash down on them. If their already falling form were to suffer another meteorite impact, they would likely be completely wiped out. However, it was clear that Yu's worries were unfounded. Charizard quickly accepted the fact that it had evolved and gained wings. It was unclear whether this was a gift from evolution, or if Charizard itself was inherently gifted. Charizard quickly familiarized itself with its wings and quickly began to fly with ease. With a single flap of its wings, Charizard's speed instantly doubled, and it flew at a breakneck speed towards the rapidly falling Yu and Xiaozu. Charizard then swiftly extended its claws, catching Yu and Xiaozu in its arms. However, since they had been falling for quite some time, almost on the verge of direct contact with the molten lava, Charizard only managed to reach them at the critical moment. While Yu and the others had barely made it through, Yu wasn't in the best of shape either. After all, gliding almost directly against the molten lava for a brief moment is hardly a joyous experience for anyone. Yu could even feel the heat from the bubbles rising from the molten lava hitting his face. Burning pain, a fiery dance of heat. This was the most vivid feeling in Yu's mind at that moment. But overall, everything had been a close call. While this process was a bit jarring, it wasn't unacceptable to Yu and Xiaozu. They even felt a small sense of joy in their hearts. After all, Yu aside, this was simply a case of surviving a great disaster and then having a good fortune. Charmeleon had not only broken through its previous bottleneck, but its strength had also increased significantly. It had even surpassed Pikachu and other top-ranked Pokémon, becoming the first Pokémon to achieve King-level power, no longer just a quasi-king. This difference couldn't be made up by a simple sum, it was a truly profound difference. At the same time, reaching King-level power meant a door to even greater power, slowly opening for Yu and his fellow Pokémon. It was the key to truly entering the battles of the true masters of the World Pokémon League, a crucial credential that broadened one's horizons and status. In short, before reaching King-level power, or even being a quasi-king, a Pokémon could only reign supreme. Once one reaches the level of Heavenly King, one truly can battle against the mighty in the heavens. Therefore, Yu's current state of mind is undeniable. Furthermore, he has lofty goals and ambitions. Although this was only the evolution of Charizard, it still represents a step towards his goal. As for Xiaoxu, this incident made her realize the true significance of her position in Yu's heart. Otherwise, during such long journeys, due to his personality, Yu always seemed to talk more with Air and Serena, and their relationships were closer. Seeing the playful banter often made Xiaoxu feel a sense of inferiority. But now, realizing that she, too, holds a certain weight in the hearts of amateurs, Xiaoxu has regained her confidence. After all, if it had been someone less important, they would certainly not have risked their lives to protect her. If Charizard hadn't evolved to save them, they would have bid farewell to this beautiful world today. Especially at this moment, still in Yu's arms, Xiaozu couldn't help but feel a warmth in her heart, and her pretty face was dyed with a blush. If Yu saw this shy little look, he would definitely cry out that he couldn't stand it. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 668 Harmony. While it wasn't the imposing Dragon Rider's appearance I'd imagined, overall, after Charizard, fearing the two people in his arms would leave him again, held them tightly all the way back to the ground, the entire process seemed insignificant and perfectly executed. It all seemed to take forever, but it only lasted a few minutes. During this time, the crowd and the Pokémon were still unaware. When they finally recovered, Charizard had already landed safely on the ground, carrying Yu and Xiaozu. Heaven will not let me die, Yu. I will fight to the death. Feeling the powerful aura emanating from Charizard, Yu felt a surge of confidence. He roared to the heavens, his laughter filled with heroic spirit. The flames of battle were now almost condensed into substance by Yu. Roar Charizard, not wanting to be outdone, unleashed a deafening roar. Visible ripples of sound spread outward from Charizard's center. Ah! That's disgusting, Charizard, you're such a jerk. Xiaoxo and Air, both wearing skirts, were affected by the noise. They instinctively pulled down their skirts, angrily hurling accusations at Charizard. Roar! Charizard was instantly startled, quickly closing its gaping mouth. Embarrassed, he scratched his head, his gaze etched with innocence. It was as if he was saying, "What's this got to do with me? Isn't it just a little loud? Is there anything wrong with being loud?" Of course, Xiaoxo and Air couldn't understand any of this, but that didn't stop them from understanding. HMPH. Charizard, you're such a lecher. Your master must have taught you a bad lesson. If you keep acting like this, I won't be making you any delicious Pokemon food anymore. Air puffed her cheeks with a hint of embarrassment, swiping a sly glance at Yu, who seemed equally confused as to why he'd suddenly been dragged into her. Yes, Air is right, Xiaoxo echoed, seemingly unconcerned. However, the flustered glances she occasionally cast at Yu held a deeper meaning. Whenever Yu glanced at her with a questioning look, Xiaoxo would quickly give in, shyly turning her head away or lowering her head, refusing to meet his gaze. This scene made Serena, the only one not wearing a skirt, wish she were wearing one too. Pikachu, of course, the atmosphere couldn't continue like this. Pikachu and the other Pokemon took the lead in breaking the awkward and ambiguous atmosphere. Because it had only just evolved, Charizard's aura was still a little difficult to control, the aura of a king lingering faintly around it. However, Pikachu and Gyarados seemed oblivious to this, each coming to Charizard's side, eyes filled with envy, pure admiration tinged with no hint of jealousy. They offered Charizard their sincere blessings, delighted at its current strength. There was no trace of the anger that comes with a younger generation surpassing their elders. Instead, their eyes were filled with relief, joy, and happiness. Seeing this, Yu's heart relaxed slightly. Seeing the Pokemon at this moment, though wounded, gathered together, chatting and laughing, in a joyful atmosphere, Yu smiled happily for the first time. Initially, Yu was indeed happy that Charizard had evolved. But later, a problem arose that made him worry. That's the question of Charizard's strength. Among Yu's Pokemon, if they were to rank them by the time they joined the team, Pikachu would undoubtedly be the leader. Even Suicune couldn't hold a candle to him. However, due to Suicune's unique nature, the Pokemon didn't fight over him. Instead, they naturally considered him second in command, second only to Pikachu. Next was Fletcher, now Flammahawk, then Ditto, and finally Gyarados. Further back, there were Crawl, Charizard, Buzzbit, and the recently hatched Snorlax, still in its infancy. Initially, they were ranked according to the time Yu captured them. However, as the Pokemon continued their journey, with the exception of Pikachu and Suicune, whose positions remained unchanged, the rankings of the other Pokemon shifted to varying degrees, taking Flammahawk as an example. Aside from Pikachu and Suicune, it was the Pokemon Yu had captured the longest. Perhaps due to its natural talent, despite Yu's initial generous resources and countless battles, its strength remained unchanged. It was constantly surpassed by Pokemon that had been captured later and ranked lower. Finally, Yu had to temporarily shelve it and transport it back to Professor Oak's lab to accompany Professor Oak. It's unclear whether it was nurtured and cared for by Professor Oak. Later, Flamingo not only evolved successfully, but also significantly improved in strength, earning it a spot on the main team. However, before Flamingo's evolution, perhaps due to its own lack of strength, Flamingo's standing within the team declined significantly. Of course, no Pokemon forced it to do this, it simply chose to lower its ranking to avoid embarrassing its trainer. It was Flamingo's own will. After all, from the very beginning, Yu had intentionally or unintentionally been bringing together Pokemon whenever he captured them, allowing them to quickly integrate into his Pokemon team. This was the reason why whenever a new Pokemon joined their team, they would rush to welcome and make friends with it, which was why Yu's Pokemon team was so harmonious. As for those Pokemon that were captured earlier, but whose strength was at a certain stage. Chapter 669 Charizard cried. As for the Pokemon that were captured earlier but whose strength was at a certain stage, take the example of the Scrab. When Yu first captured the Scrab, it wasn't the robust and sturdy Scrab it is today. Instead, it was several times smaller than the average Scrab, appearing somewhat underdeveloped. Yu's capture of the Scrab was a matter of chance. The Scrab accidentally opened Yuyu's Pokemon and was captured. Out of a sense of responsibility for his Pokemon, Yuyu didn't reject the Scrab, simply because it was unwanted and underdeveloped, or abandon or release it. Instead, he kept it with him and nurtured it. However, the Scrab's situation at that time was very similar to that of the Flamingo, so Yuyu placed it back with Professor Oak to train other new Pokemon. However, after returning from Professor Oak, the Scrab was unstoppable. Not only did it successfully evolve into Giganotosaurus, but its strength also increased. Perhaps this was also due to various reasons among the Pokemon. With the exception of Pikachu and Suicune, two relatively special Pokemon, Yuyu's group of Pokemon didn't care about the order in which they were captured. Each Pokemon was like a friend. There was no hierarchy. Even Pikachu and Suicune, though implicitly considered the highest-ranking Pokemon, played with the others. Even Pikachu, the most senior, sometimes acted like a little brother or a mischievous child, playing and frolicking with the larger Pokemon. If Pikachu was like this, Suicune was even more so. Because of Suicune's unique nature, while it held a high position among the Pokemon, it was actually the third smallest among the Pokemon in the land. However, the innate talent of a legendary beast allowed it to grow rapidly, reaching the level of a quasi-proto-king in a short period of time. It could even bond evolve with its trainer, further boosting its power. However, Suicune's age meant that, despite being a legendary beast, its power couldn't rise so quickly. This kept it stuck at the quasi-proto-king level, with no progress at all. Even if it did, it was only through bond evolution. Suicune often appears aloof, with an air of ethereal beauty, like an immortal. But that's only the way it appears around unfamiliar Pokemon and people. In reality, Suicune, perhaps influenced by his trainer from the beginning, is a true foodie. Furthermore, he's barely past his juvenile stage. In some ways, his actions and behaviors rival those of Buzzbot and Snorlax. Peka, well done, Charmeleon, I didn't expect that you could evolve into Charizard successfully. And your strength even reached a king level earlier than us, Gyarados, you've made us seniors feel ashamed. Hey, I say, do you have to treat me when the time comes? Who, treat me? What for, Gyakuji? Oh, you're not pretending to be ignorant. Or maybe you've become the strongest among us, and we can't do anything to you and we're not going to deny it. Gyakuji waved the big claws in his hand, and although he looked ferocious, the effect contained in it and a sincere blessing for Charizard completely betrayed it. Pikachu, old crab, look at what you're saying. Does Charizard seem like such a stingy Pokemon? Woohoo old dragon, this is really not easy for me. As expected, you're still the boss. You know me best. Come on, let's go together. Charizard, originally panicking, was so moved by Pikachu's words. Tears welled up in his eyes. If Pikachu hadn't been so nimble in dodging Charizard's lunge, he'd probably be in Pikachu's arms, bursting into tears. But even though he dodged, it didn't affect the emotion in Charizard's eyes as he looked at Pikachu. Pikachu, go away, stop disgusting me, kid. My sexual orientation is normal. Men love their mothers. Pikachu looked at Charizard with a sidelong glance of disdain. Gyarados, yeah, how could Charizard be that kind of Pokemon? Don't tell me we're being ungrateful, Charizard, just treat us to something delicious. But I don't have anything delicious. If Master hadn't fed me, I'd have starved to death long ago. Gyarados, I know you don't have anything to eat. I'm talking about the food Master gave us. When Sister Xiaoxia distributes dinner, just divide your portion equally among us. Of course, if the portions are too small, you can treat us in installments. Anyway, if there's anything delicious, you have to share it with us. How can you do this? You can't even let go of my little morsel. Can I not evolve now? Don't steal my food. My only joy right now, besides fighting, is eating the delicious food Sister Xiaoxia makes. Charizard had a mournful look on his face, and he was practically crying. What the hell? How could you treat me like this? This sudden evolution wasn't something they'd intended. Pikachu, what do you think? Pikachu flashed Charizard an adorable smile. If the crowd of attractive female fans saw this expression, they'd probably scream with excitement. Gyarados, no room for negotiation, it's a done deal. Giant Claw, you little brat, I'm so pissed. You're getting away with it. You're actually trying to get away with it. Forget it. No way. Raw Charizard burst into tears, sobbing like a bullied child. With a grieved look, He looked at Pikachu and the other Pokémon. Finally, as if nothing was working, he looked back at his master, as if to ask him to make the decision for him. Chapter 670, Moltres vs. Charizard. Charizard burst into tears, sobbing like a bullied child. With a vexed look, he looked at Pikachu and the other Pokémon. Finally, as if his words were failing him, he looked back at his master, as if to ask him to make his own decision. Yu stared at Charizard with a frown. Where was the manliness left in this boy? Damn, he'd just evolved. While he knew he'd be thrilled and excited, there was no need to be so excited, crying. That was a bit too much. Besides, you can cry if you want. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Look at yourself with your big eyes. Is this some new trick you've learned? Some cute, coquettish act? Damn it. You're not trying to trick me with this, are you? I'm telling you, your skills won't work on me. Yu screamed frantically in his heart, his movements unwavering. He charged forward, leaping lightly before striking Charizard on the head with a brutal, merciless blow. Instantly, Charizard tried to cover the wound with its hands. However, due to its evolution, its arms were too short, and after a long time of searching, it couldn't reach its head. Finally, it had to drop its head and bury it between its hands, assuming a fearful expression. Charizard could even feel the slight swelling on its head. The mere touch caused tears to well up in its eyes, and it looked as if it was about to burst into tears. Damn it. I didn't expect you to have such confidence after evolving. You're so good at acting like a prankster. Or maybe your body has become more fragile after evolving. Yu was furious. If he hadn't been mindful of the people watching, he would have rushed over and given Charizard a beating. This was clearly an evolution, and its strength had suddenly become the strongest among amateur Pokémon, and it had also grown in power. Yu was naturally furious at this, gnashing his teeth, his words tinged with murderous intent. How I say, are you going to go up or go up? Or go up again? For some reason, while saying this, Yu even performed his 7th set of radio gymnastics as a warm-up exercise. Roar! Upon seeing this, Charizard was instantly terrified and immediately dropped his neck, refusing to be stubborn anymore. He quickly straightened his body and unleashed a deafening roar at Moltres, who had been watching the events unfolding on his side from the beginning. Along with the roar, Charizard unleashed a powerful dragon breath. In mid-air, the dragon breath transformed into the form of a savage oriental dragon, twisting its massive energy-filled body and charging towards Moltres with unstoppable destructive force. Moltres, however, didn't sit still and wait for death, facing the powerful dragon breath attack. Moltres unleashed its signature fire jet to block the attack, but this time, the flames didn't completely block the dragon's breath attack as it had hoped. Instead, the ferocious dragon tore through the flame jet's defenses inch by inch. A single whirling charge seemed to slice through the flame jet's core. Waves of flame surged, blazing with heat, a scene that lasted forever, like a flame that would last forever. However, even the most powerful flames eventually extinguish, not even Moltres, a legendary fire beast. Ultimately, the energy from the flame jet completely dissipated, but thanks to the previous fire jet's resistance, Moltres had a chance to dodge. With this opportunity to dodge, Moltres certainly wouldn't stand there idly, facing the dragon's breath. With a single high-flying strike, she dodged the powerful blow. Furthermore, Moltres seized the opportunity to unleash its feather perch. In a matter of seconds, Moltres' previously shabby form was restored to pristine condition. Its spirited demeanor, as if nothing had happened, its eyes fixed intently on Yu and his companions. However, this time, its focus shifted to Charizard. As if sensing hostility, Charizard's playful demeanor was completely gone. It was as if Charizard was truly itself at this moment, a proud, battle-hardened warrior, finally willing to take up arms and engage in a real fight. Invisible wisps of energy emanated from the two Pokémon. In the end, the sheer force of these two Pokémon's auras completely enveloped the entire mountain. Both Pokémon were fire-type, possessing the flying attribute. The only difference was that one was a legendary Pokémon, while the other was one of the region's original starter Pokémon, yet also considered one of the pinnacle of combat power. Neither was willing to concede defeat, their gazes fixed intently on the other, fearing that in the blink of an eye, the other would make a move detrimental to their own. Roar! Flame Charizard roared, as if in a show of defiance. The immense sound waves practically transformed into a single, tangible wave, charging fiercely towards Moltres. Moltres, however, showed no sign of fear. Not wanting to be outdone, it unleashed a piercing cry. The deafening roar and the piercing cry collided, their colors differing but still remarkably similar. The mere collision of the two sound waves was enough to cause the surrounding Pokémon and the crowd present to instinctively cover their ears, expressions of pain etched across their faces. Roar Charizard continued to roar, this time sounding like a genuine challenge, not just in the sound but also in its actions. After the roar, Charizard glared at Moltres with undisguised disdain, then extended its short claws and waved them forward. Just as Moltres was still perplexed, Charizard's claws suddenly shifted in shape. Chapter 671, Moltres vs Charizard. Just as Moltres was still a bit confused, Charizard's waving claws suddenly shifted. Seeing the hand gesture Charizard made, Yiyu's face darkened completely. Serena, and Xiaoxu were stunned. None of them understood, just dumbfounded and dazed. Their eyes almost instinctively blinked, confused as to what was happening. The atmosphere had been tense before, but how could it suddenly change? Then, realizing what was happening, they all looked at Yiyu strangely, their eyes filled with questioning. Hey, what do you mean by looking at me like that? I didn't teach Charizard any of this. He's self-taught. Can you blame me, especially and Serena? One of you has traveled with me the longest, and the other has known me the longest. Don't you understand me? I'm really going to be hurt by you acting like this, okay? My heart has already taken 100,000 points of critical damage. If you don't comfort me, this matter will never end. Why was it that after Charizard made that gesture, everyone present and the Pokémon fell completely silent? It turned out that Charizard's short, three-fingered hand had its middle claw pointed at Moltres, while the two adjacent claws pointed at its throat. Although Moltres, a Pokémon, was somewhat confused by Charizard's intentions, it was still a legendary beast, so its intelligence wasn't too low. Judging from the expressions of the people around it and the Pokémon, it could at least understand that this was a challenge from the giant. Moltres was instantly furious. It felt its dignity as a legendary fire beast had been completely challenged. After all, it was a legendary fire beast. While not the strongest of the legendary fire beasts, it was at least considered top tier, so it was definitely ranked among the top. And in the Pokémon world, there was an unwritten rule. A legendary beast of a certain type can almost always dominate the Pokémon of that type. Even if a Pokémon is significantly more powerful than the legendary beast, it still has to obey and be under its command. As for why? It can't be helped, its bloodline is more noble. Flame Moltres let out a long, heavenward cry, then flapped its wings, transforming into the legendary bird agent, charging straight towards Charizard with terrifying force. Charizard, go ahead. Let me see just how powerful you are after your evolution. Without further ado, Yiyu waved his hand, instantly commanding Charizard to flap its wings and charge forward to meet Moltres. Roar! Upon hearing its trainer's command, Charizard lost its previous nonchalant, seemingly demanding a beating. A surge of energy gathered around it, nearly condensing into substance. Then, Charizard suddenly unleashed its vast wings, and with a single powerful jerk, its entire body soared into the air. However, before it could reach Moltres' height, the claws on its short arms began to glow emerald green, then grew larger and larger, practically converging into a phantom. Good boy. Charizard, as expected of Charizard, is actually going to fight head-on. Interesting. Then, let's go, Dragon Claw. Yiyu immediately saw through Charizard's claim of using the See-Out skill. Far from feeling the slightest bit of worry for Charizard at this moment, his face was filled with excitement. After all, warriors like them naturally loved head-on collisions, the clash of flesh against flesh. To them, the sound was like the music of nature. Since both Pokémon were flying at extremely high speeds, the collision occurred in a mere instant. However, apart from the loud explosion, the two Pokémon were evenly matched, neither gaining an advantage. They quickly needed to adjust their positions, quickly distance themselves from the other, and prepare for the next wave of attacks. Both Pokémon were undoubtedly dissatisfied with this outcome. After all, each was confident they could inflict significant damage with their attack, but they never expected it to be blocked. However, upon closer inspection, it was understandable. After all, while Moltres' Divine Bird Agent was significantly more powerful than Charizard's Dragon Claw, it ultimately lacked the slightest advantage in terms of stats. Charizard, however, had a slight advantage thanks to the Dragon-type nature of Dragon Claw. However, As you had observed earlier, while the two sides appeared evenly matched, Charizard was actually at a disadvantage. Even as a legendary beast, Moltres was still vulnerable after using Divine Bird Agent. Otherwise, they wouldn't have engaged Charizard again, and after just one move, they weren't already at a distance. Moltres was simply waiting for the negative emotions to subside, and the flickering electric furnace on her body represented Moltres' current predicament. As for Charizard, while seemingly suffering internal injuries and appearing completely unfazed, it was actually already groaning in pain. Long-term training with Yu had honed its character into one of unyielding determination. It could even be said that it had assimilated the personalities of every Pokémon, and once engaged in battle, it fought with all its might. Consequently, despite the slight pain within its body, Charizard charged forward without retreat, intending to seize this opportunity to inflict another crushing blow on Moltres. This time, it held nothing back. With a swift acceleration, it was already at Moltres' side. Before Moltres could react, it had already swept them face to face, embracing them in its embrace. Fortunately, Moltres was relatively large, not the size of Flamahawk. Otherwise, being held in Charizard's arms would have felt like a father embracing his son. But all that wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing is that Charizard is holding Moltres and is rapidly rising into the sky at a rapid speed. Chapter 672, Moltres vs Charizard. Most importantly, Charizard, holding Moltres, began soaring rapidly into the sky. Then, Charizard was seen spinning in circles, their speed increasing. Eventually, Charizard and Moltres were almost invisible, and in their orbit, a blue planetary pattern slowly appeared. This was likely Charizard's combat skill, Earth Throw. It seemed Charizard was desperate, feeling unsafe even with distanced attacks, and resorted to personal combat, employing his own melee style. Overall, the effect was quite good, as Moltres remained firmly in Charizard's arms, unable to move. Then, without further ado, Earth Throw was fully unleashed. Moltres was mercilessly slammed to the ground like a real-life sack. However, Charizard at least showed some humanity. It didn't retaliate by throwing Moltres into the lava when it was caught off guard. Instead, it slammed Moltres into the rocky ground. Yu, having witnessed this, breathed a sigh of relief. Initially, Yu had expected Charizard to seize this opportunity to slam Moltres into the lava. Then, not to mention whether Moltres would be incinerated by the bubbling lava below, the mere thought of Moltres being injured was something Yu didn't want to see. This isn't to say that Yu was incredibly kind and generous, as he could still offer a hand to protect the Pokémon that had nearly killed them before. Rather, no matter which Pokémon he faced, Yu couldn't bring himself to do anything ruthless. After all, after so long, Yu still had a certain tinge of affection for Pokémon. And perhaps it was a lingering belief from childhood that all Pokémon were inherently kind. As for why some Pokémon later became so sinister, Yu couldn't bring himself to do anything. In short, it was either something bad that had happened to it, or it had been led astray by its trainer. After all, a trainer can influence a Pokémon, both in its personality and its life. And what's more, Moltres is a legendary beast. Legendary beasts are already extremely rare, and Yu certainly didn't want to see anything happen to one. Furthermore, even if Charizard did throw Moltres into the lava, it wouldn't necessarily be burned alive. You see, Moltres was still in a deep sleep beneath the lava. If it weren't for Amen, regardless of whether it would have been disturbed, at least Yu and his companions wouldn't have found this place unless it was an accident. And so, Moltres was slammed to the ground by Charizard, kicking up a cloud of dust in front of Yu and the others. The ground, deeply sunken by Moltres' heavy impact, began to spread outward like a spider web, only to stop at their feet. Oh my goodness! Is Charizard on drugs? He's suddenly so awesome. After Yu finally put his mind at ease, he was filled with deep surprise. Charizard, seemingly delighted with his work, began flexing its muscles in front of the crowd and the Pokémon. Flame, but before it could show off for long, a sharp bird cry interrupted its display. Furthermore, from behind Charizard, unseen, a thick jet of flame shot directly at him. The force of this impact sent Charizard's entire massive body careening forward, tumbling to the ground. The sheer surprise of the attack even threw Charizard to its knees. Its body was already tumbling under the force until, by chance, its head struck a protruding rock, bringing it to a stop. The impact was so severe, Charizard felt dizzy and even walked with a shaky gait. Its massive wings, unfurled, spun incessantly, kicking up clouds of dust. Damn it! Moltres is so cunning. He actually uses a sneak attack from behind. I can't stand this. Go Charizard. Let your fury burn through. It seemed as if he had already exhausted every one of Charizard's abilities and there were no more skill orders to issue. Therefore, Yu decided to let Charizard go for it. He had given it a head start, it was up to him to see how it would perform. Roar! Charizard, forcing himself to steady his still shaky body, shook his head, and let out another furious roar. This roar was truly unstoppable. It startled not only Yu and his group watching, but even Amen, who had been hiding behind the scenes, acting in a guilty conscience, was startled and jumped up. He instinctively flung the object he was fiddling with. The commotion immediately drew everyone's and Pokemon's attention away from the Charizard-Molten duel. They turned to look at Amen, who was scratching his head and grinning in embarrassment. He seemed to be thinking back to what had just happened. Serena and the other two hurried, still a little frightened, and quietly inched their feet, putting a safe distance between them and Amen. Yu was less polite, glaring at Amen fiercely. It would have been fine if that bastard hadn't protected Xiaoxu, but he'd actually used him as a shield. He saw that he'd left me to deal with, and if he didn't settle the score with him later, he'd be letting his iron fist down. Amen, under the gazes of the crowd, was sweating profusely. His clothes were soaked with sweat, and he couldn't help but swallow. But for some reason, he kept his footing steady. He quickly and quietly shifted his feet, moving the small gadget he had flung aside and shock back to his feet. Then, everyone's attention was quickly drawn back to the battle between Moltres and Charizard. He swiftly picked up the gadget. Don't underestimate the insignificant little thing in his hand. It was a crucial part of his plan. Chapter 673, Both Sides Suffer. Roar Amen's side was merely a minor incident during the battle. Everyone's attention was quickly drawn to Charizard's roar. This time, Charizard, deep in hoarse stance, channeled his inner energy into his Danshin, unleashing a thunderous roar. Then, as if truly unleashing his inner energy, waves of invisible energy began to condense around him. Furthermore, visible to the naked eye, streams of energy began to converge in front of Charizard's mouth, eventually forming a spherical shape. Just when everyone thought this was a skill akin to the destruction of time, the next scene truly shattered their illusions. The condensed ball of light radiated a scorching heat, as if capable of melting everything in the world, a temperature almost comparable to that of magma. Of course, whether it possessed the same destructive power as magma was hard to say. Overall, however, it was likely a powerful skill. I can't believe you learned a new move, Charizard. Purgatory, that's a great move. At this moment, Yanayu, who was checking out the Pokédex, was even more amazed. Her eyes were already shining. After all, no matter which trainer or Pokémon, they were only looking forward to the new moves they would learn. Of course, except for those Pokémon whose size changed significantly after evolution, or who transformed into completely new Pokémon. For most Pokémon, Purgatory was just a shortcut to learning new moves after their evolution. While the effects of Purgatory were very similar to those of Flame Vortex, Purgatory was more effective and more powerful. While Flame Vortex also trapped Pokémon, the Vortex's strength wasn't very strong, making it easy for Pokémon to break free. But Purgatory was different, it completely engulfed the Pokémon and scorched them. Even if the Pokémon could break free, it would still require an extremely powerful move. Still, for the current situation, it should be manageable. Yu continued reading with anticipation, but a hint of nervousness lingered within him. After all, while Purgatory's skill was powerful, it was still essentially a fire attribute skill. With the word fire in its name, it naturally couldn't escape the constraints of that attribute. And Moltres was a fire attribute beast, which presented a problem. Purgatory probably wouldn't do much damage to Moltres. Was it Moltres' inherent resistance to our academy? Even at its peak, Moltres, it could be said that fire was an integral part of its being. Flame Moltres also sensed the threat posed by Charizard's upcoming skill. This prevented it from impulsively charging forward and confronting Charizard. Instead, it cautiously kept a distance from the dragon. But how could Charizard let it do that? Seeing Moltres about to fly out of range, Charizard stopped charging and unleashed its skill without thinking twice. At this point, because Charizard's sudden attack was unexpected, Moltres was completely caught off guard and was effectively trapped in the flaming cage. Breaking free would be a real challenge. Of course, this might apply to other Pokémon. For Moltres, a legendary fire-type beast like itself, it could break free with minimal effort. After all, as mentioned earlier, Inferno and Flame Vortex are similar. When trapped, both have a high chance of triggering a burning effect. However, this burning effect would be completely ineffective against a fire-type Pokémon. For example, Paralysis has no effect on electric-type Pokémon. Poison has no effect on poison-type Pokémon, and Leech Seed's absorption effect has no effect on grass-type Pokémon. Given all of this, as long as Moltres can execute a powerful move powerful enough to break through Inferno, she can be considered a successful escape. Of course, while the struggle to break free wouldn't inflict damage from the burning effect, it would still be directly exposed to the damage from Inferno's attack. As if anticipating this, Moltres, after letting out a cry from within Inferno, unleashed the even more powerful Divine Bird Agent to break free. With a single charge, the Inferno was instantly ripped open. Then, Divine Bird Agent, gathering momentum, charged directly at Charizard, which hadn't reacted. The impact instantly knocked Charizard to the ground. While not completely incapacitated, the occasional groan of pain indicated its current state of distress. However, at the moment Charizard was sent flying by Divine Bird Agent, instinctively, driven by combat, unleashed its claws to strike Moltres, which had collided with it. The strike was so sudden that Moltres felt a weight on her body before she could even react to Divine Bird Agent's backlash. The moment Charizard was sent flying again, it was instantly slammed into the ground again by the immense force. This time, Moltres suffered greatly, as the paralysis effect of the Divine Bird Agent had only just begun to take effect after it had been slammed into the ground. Without even the time to use its motion ability to recover, it lay frozen in the pit. Like a statue, if it weren't for its still moving eyes indicating it hadn't lost its fighting ability, most people would have thought it had. Even so, the situation was a mutually destructive one. Neither Pokémon gained any advantage, yet neither was immediately incapacitated. It was a deeply awkward situation, unable to fight or retreat. It's really a case of searching high and low for something and finally finding it. I've finally been waiting for this moment. Just when everyone was silent because of the lose-lose situation, a laugh with a bit of arrogance and pride rang out. Chapter 674 Sneak Attack. It's like searching for something without a trace. I finally found it. Just as everyone was silent over the mutually devastating situation, a laugh tinged with a hint of wild triumph rang out. Yu was instantly awakened. Like a slumbering infernape, his eyes gleamed with murderous intent as he glared fiercely at the now smug Amen. Yu's gaze paused, and Amen, previously smug, felt as if pinned down by some ferocious Pokémon. He shuddered, his entire body trembling. He glanced at Yu with a hint of fear, but the weapon in his hand quickly gave him a newfound confidence, like a source of strength. In this moment, holding the technological weapon he had developed, Amen stared back at Yu without hesitation, the slightest hint of fear vanishing. I'm really being too cautious. No matter how powerful Yu and his Pokémon are, they certainly can't defeat the technological weaponry in my hands. Besides, right now, Yu's Pokémon are already injured and broken in the battle with Charmeleon. How could they possibly stand a chance against me? Yu kicked his foot and retrieved the Yajiao spear, which he had retracted after flying up from his stored ring. He pointed the spear directly at Amen, ready to stab him. Yu might not be able to kill Pokémon, and even if he did, he would be hesitant. But when it comes to people, he has no scruples at all. After all, his trials in the Jianghu back home were more than worthwhile. While he might not be ruthless in killing, at least he would strike without hesitation against those who wanted to harm him. Well, don't move, or I'll unleash this weapon in my hand. The moment Yu moved, Amen quickly raised his weapon, shielding him from the crowd. The so-called weapon in Amen's hand turned out to be a remote control. As if realizing his words had no intimidating effect at all, Amen decisively flipped the remote's on-off switch. Suddenly, a burst of sound waves erupted from the camera strapped to his chest. Unimpeded, the sound waves followed the direction of the remote's control, striking Suicune, who had been quietly recovering. As the invisible sound wave struck Suicune, who had previously appeared calm and unperturbed by external affairs, he let out a scream. His entire body lost its balance, and he fell to the side. Not only that, when Yu reacted and looked over, he saw that Suicune, who had been wailing, had inexplicably lost his ability to fight. Holy crap! What kind of black technology is this? Yu cursed inwardly. The effect of killing a chicken to scare the monkeys was very effective, and he immediately stopped making any rash moves. He coldly watched Amen's every move. However, today, after searching for a needle in a haystack, it was effortless. You, are you overconfident in your own strength? If you didn't fight Moltres to a draw, perhaps I would have been wary of you. But with these remaining troops, can you withstand my sonic weapon attack? Amen laughed smugly and arrogantly, completely ignoring Yu and the others. So your original target was Moltres, right? Yu only then realized that his opponent's target had always been Moltres, dormant in the volcano. Although he had suspected this from the beginning, he was simply confused by Amen's lack of intention to attack. This caused Yu to let down his guard somewhat, thinking that after completely defeating Moltres, he would deal with Amen himself. However, he never expected such a drastic change to occur in the intervening period. He had never imagined that a Grandmaster like him could be threatened, and that the opponent appeared to be completely powerless, not even possessing a single Pokémon. Yes, my target has always been Moltres. It can't be helped, Moltres is so valuable. Besides its inherent value as a divine beast, the flame it possesses is the sacred flame that has been held in every regional league in Japan since its inception. Just think about it. And someone has already offered a high price for Moltres. Taking money to ward off disasters is what we Pokémon bounty hunters do, as if to show off his success. Amen showed no awareness of the villain's death due to excessive talk. Instead, he looked smug. Seeing the smug look on his face, Yu wanted to rush over and slap him twice. Long-tailed Firefox, use Jet Flame. Vulpix, use Jet Flame. Firefox, use Sparks. Mincheo, use Water Gun. Dragonoid, take advantage of this opportunity. Just when Amen was confident, thinking everything was under control, several clear and melodious female voices suddenly rang out, seemingly out of nowhere. It turned out that while Amen and Yu were chatting, their attention was distracted. After the three daughters exchanged glances, one Pokémon skill after another was called out. Without exception, each Pokémon skills were directed at Amen. He thought to himself that something was wrong, but Amen's reaction was incredibly quick. He suddenly pulled a shield-like object from his pocket and held it across his chest. As the skill was about to be unleashed, the shield-like object began to transform into a phantom shield, blocking Amen. As the shield's shadow appeared, skills bombarded it one after another. After only causing the shield to shake slightly a few times, each skill seemed to have exhausted all its power and began to gradually dissipate. Seeing these sneak attacks being blocked one after another, Amen immediately wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. Chapter 675 Deterrence. Huff, huff, huff. Panting heavily, Amen finally calmed his excitement. That was a close call. I almost got ambushed by you guys. I didn't expect you three girls to pull such a trick. It seems the skills I showed earlier weren't strong enough, huh? After what had just happened, Amen didn't dare to be careless anymore. His earlier expression of eagerness and interest in chatting was gone. His gaze turned cold, and a faint, eerie smile played at the corners of his mouth. In that case, I'll let you taste it again. With that, Amen was about to activate his camera's sonic attack again. But just then, a small figure suddenly materialized beside him. Before Amen could react, it slammed the remote control he was clutching. Because the attack had come so suddenly, Amen hadn't expected the second wave, having just survived one, to come so swiftly. As a result, the remote control in his hand was naturally slapped away. Only then did Amen clearly see who the owner of that figure was. If not Dragonite, what other Pokémon could it be? From the very beginning, Serena and the other two girls hadn't been targeting Amen himself, but the remote control that controlled sound waves in his hand. While the other Pokémon were using their abilities to distract Amen, Dragonite had the opportunity to unleash its signature ability, blending into the surroundings and stealthily sneaking up on Amen. This led to the subsequent scene. This was all due to Amen's overconfidence in his control over the situation. Furthermore, he believed that as long as he could keep Yu, the biggest problem, under control and eliminate him, his plan would be a complete success. As for Serena and the other two girls, after spending 2 days with him, Amen had come to understand that while the three girls from Air might be exceptional in other areas, none of them were truly capable of Pokémon battles. Aside from Air, who was considered relatively strong, the others were truly lacking. Therefore, given all these circumstances, Amen was completely relaxed and unprepared for Serena and the other two. Good opportunity, watch out. Pikachu uses 100,000 volts. Seeing the remote control Amen used to control the sound waves being knocked away by the Dragonite, his vision suddenly lit up. Not wanting to attack himself, he simply ordered Pikachu, the fastest of all Pokemon, to attack. HMPH. I think you're courting death. After an initial moment of bewilderment, Amen quickly reacted. This was due to his swift reflexes, cultivated through years of experience as a Pokemon hunter. If it weren't for these quick reflexes, Amen would have likely encountered countless mishaps in his previous Pokemon hunts, leading to mission failures and even his own death. And so, just as Pikachu's 100,000 volts was about to strike, Amen first kicked the Dragonite, who hadn't had time to retreat from his leg, away. Then, he raised his shield, transforming it into an energy shield to block the 100,000 volts. Just as Pikachu was moving, Yu had already begun to move. Just as Yu had taken 2 steps, Amen, after completing a series of defensive maneuvers, suddenly grabbed the camera hanging from his chest. A shutter clicked. Immediately afterwards, a sound wave emanated from the camera, spreading directly towards Pikachu. Pikachu, caught off guard by Amen's quick counterattack, was unable to dodge and was struck directly by the wave. In a moment, Pikachu's eyes shone with circles, and he lost his ability to fight. The figure, who had previously leaped into the air, unleashing the 100,000 volts, began to fall. If Yu hadn't been quick to slam on the brakes and pull back to catch Pikachu, Pikachu would have suffered a second blow. However, because of this, Yu's initial offensive momentum was also retracted. And so, the situation once again fell into a stalemate. However, due to the previous incident, Amen was now more prepared and would not be fooled so easily. He also retrieved the remote control that had been dropped by Dragonite. Looking at the resentful looks being given to him by both the Pokemon and Yu and the others, Amen couldn't help but smile disdainfully. He raised his index finger in front of him and waved it, speaking slowly and proudly, "Tisk, tisk, tisk. You guys can't do that. Rather than letting your Pokemon lose their combat capabilities in vain, it's better to just stay still. Isn't that better? Let me tell you, my sound waves are the result of my special research. They're incredibly lethal to Pokemon. Any Pokemon not in peak condition could be incapacitated by my sound waves." His gaze involuntarily fixed, Yu looked with some trepidation at the seemingly unremarkable camera strapped to Amen's chest. "Also, don't even think about attacking me. You've seen my energy shield before. Unless it runs out of energy or the power difference between our abilities is too great, it's a 100% defense." As if to completely dissuade everyone, Amen began to introduce his equipment one by one. Putting aside other factors, Amen truly possessed some talent. These advanced technologies were not so difficult to create, given the difficulty of finding the materials. If they were produced in large quantities, wouldn't the current world order be completely rewritten? However, Amen's introduction had a strong deterrent effect. As expected, Yu, who had been a little restless, and the Pokemon who were eager to try, calmed down at this moment. He watched the situation unfold. He seemed very satisfied with the attitudes displayed by everyone in the Pokemon. Amen first adjusted the position of his sonic camera, then held the remote control in one hand and the Pokeball in the other. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.